Hey everyone, and welcome to Nighttime Stories. I'm here to help you drift off into a peaceful sleep. Let me know where you're watching from. I always love seeing how far these stories reach. Now, get comfortable and relax. It was 3 in the morning when I first heard it. A soft tapping at my bedroom window, just enough to pull me out of that half-sleep where dreams bleed into the dark. At first I thought it was tree branches or maybe a bird slamming into the glass. But the sound was too steady, too deliberate. Tap, pause, tap, another pause. My room was on the first floor of the house, the window sitting a few feet above the ground with a view of the backyard. I hesitated, heart thudding in my chest, before pulling the curtain back just an inch. That is when I saw him. A boy, no older than maybe 8 or 9. Standing barefoot in the grass, his thin frame lit by the wash of the security light that clicked on with motion. His clothes were old-fashioned, loose and pale, hanging like they belonged to someone else. But what unsettled me most was how calm he looked, just standing there, head tilted, eyes fixed on me through the glass. I froze, convinced my mind was playing tricks on me. But then his lips moved and I heard him. His voice was so soft I had to strain to make it out. "Can I come in?" That alone was enough to chill me. But then he added, almost like a secret he should not be telling me, "I used to live here." I did what anyone in my position would do. I stumbled back from the window and grabbed my phone, half ready to call the police, half ready to call a neighbor. By the time I looked back, the boy was gone. The security light still glowed across the yard, but there was no one there, not even a shadow. I spent the rest of the night wide awake, the curtain pulled tight, my ears tuned for another sound. Nothing came. By morning I almost managed to convince myself I had dreamed the whole thing. Stress, lack of sleep, an overactive imagination fed by too many ghost stories online. That illusion shattered when I went to open the window for some air. Across the sill were smudges of dirt, faint but unmistakable, small footprints, the size a child would make, and they led inward, as though something had climbed from the outside in. The problem was, the window was locked. I stood there for a long time, staring at those muddy marks, my stomach in knots. Every logical explanation I tried to build fell apart under its own weight. Maybe it was some prank by a neighborhood kid, but how would they know about the lock? Maybe I tracked the dirt in myself, but the size of the prints was far too small. That day at work I could barely focus. Every time my computer screen dimmed, I caught myself glancing at my reflection in the black glass, half expecting to see someone standing behind me. The thought of returning home that evening felt heavier than it should. When I did finally pull into the driveway, I lingered in the car longer than necessary, eyes flicking to the bedroom window where it had happened. The curtain was closed, but I swore I could feel something watching. I forced myself to push it down, to breathe, to act normal. The rest of the night I tried distracting myself with television and noise, anything to keep my attention off the silence pressing in from the backyard. When I finally crawled into bed, I locked the window again, double-checked it, and shut my eyes as tightly as I could. It did not help. The silence had a way of magnifying every creak, every whisper of wind. And though no tapping came that night, I dreamed of the boy. His face, pale and expressionless, staring at me through the glass as though he had all the time in the world. When I woke, the dream clung to me like damp clothes. I told myself it was nothing, just a lonely kid maybe, or my brain creating monsters out of shadows. But deep down I knew this was the start of something I did not fully understand. I just did not realize how quickly it would escalate. The second night I told myself it was all in my head. I even made a point of leaving the blinds shut tight, like maybe if I refused to look, nothing would happen. I poured a drink, watched mindless television, and tried to convince myself I was being stupid. But that nervous tick was still there, the urge to glance over my shoulder toward the window. When I finally went to bed, I left a small lamp on in the corner. I figured if a burglar or some creep really was hanging around, the light would make them think twice. I must have drifted off sometime past midnight because the next thing I remember was waking to the sound of tapping. Slow, deliberate, not frantic like an animal, not random like branches, a pattern. Tap, pause, tap. I knew without looking exactly what it was. My chest tightened, sweat already breaking out along my hairline. I wanted to stay frozen, pretend to be asleep, but curiosity got the better of me. I cracked the curtain with 2 fingers. Nothing. The yard was empty, the security light glowing across the patchy grass, insects buzzing around its halo. But when I looked down at the sill, I could see faint streaks of mud smeared along the frame. Someone had touched the glass. I pressed my forehead against the curtain and whispered to myself like a lunatic, "Just a kid messing with you, just some neighbor's brat sneaking out at night." But the voice in my head asked the question I had been avoiding. What kind of kid comes back 2 nights in a row at 3 in the morning, barefoot, asking to come inside? The next morning, I tried to get answers. There was an older couple who had lived next door for years, so I walked over under the excuse of borrowing a tool. We chatted a bit about the weather and home repairs before I finally asked, as casually as I could, if they knew anything about kids wandering the street at night. The wife's expression stiffened. She looked at her husband, then back at me. "You saw a boy, didn't you?" I froze, the words sticking to my tongue. She must have seen the shock on my face because she nodded slowly, like she already knew the answer. "The family before you," she said, voice quieter now. "They had a son, sweet little thing. Went missing one night. Police searched everywhere. Woods, drainage ditches, neighbors' sheds. Never found a trace. Parents moved away not long after." The husband cleared his throat and added, "That was years ago. Place has been rented out a few times since then. Some folks last only a few months. House has a reputation. House has a reputation." I tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out flat. "So you're saying people see him?" The wife didn't smile. "I'm saying you should keep your curtains shut at night." We'll see. The rest of that day I went through the motions of normal life, but my head was buzzing. If they were telling the truth, then what I saw wasn't just some random kid. The thought settled in my stomach like ice. That night, I was determined to stay awake. I made coffee, sat in the living room with the television muted, and kept watch on the clock. Midnight. 1, 2. I was fighting heavy eyelids by the time 3 o'clock rolled around. At first it was silent, and I almost thought I had imagined everything. Then came the knock. Not at the window this time, but at the back door. 3 gentle raps. I felt my insides twist. Every instinct screamed at me to ignore it, to stay seated, but my legs moved on their own. I crept toward the kitchen, each floorboard groaning under my weight. When I reached the door, I saw the faint outline of small fingers pressed against the glass panel. Not a full hand, just fingertips leaving smudges. I stumbled back, knocking into the counter. By the time I found the nerve to look again, the glass was clear, nothing outside. That was the breaking point. I called the police. When the officer arrived, I explained as best I could without sounding insane. He checked the yard with a flashlight, walked the perimeter, and finally shrugged. No footprints, no signs of forced entry. Probably just local kids screwing with you. But I knew better. There were no neighborhood kids, not the kind that show up at 3 in the morning barefoot and whispering through the window. I slept little that night, and when I did, I dreamed of the boy. He was standing at the foot of my bed, head tilted the same way as before, asking over and over, "Can I come in? Can I come in?" Each time I refused, his voice grew louder, sharper, until it wasn't a child's voice at all, but something deeper, older, echoing like it came from the walls themselves. I woke, gasping, the lamp still burning, sheets twisted around my legs. For a moment I thought it was just a nightmare. Then I saw the mud on the floor, a thin trail of prints, small and bare, starting from the window and leading across the room. And they stopped right at the side of my bed. I sat there frozen, every nerve screaming, the sunlight just beginning to spill through the blinds. I could not explain it away this time. Not a dream, not a trick of the mind. He had been here. Inside. I told myself I should move, should pack a bag and run, but something in me resisted. Like if I left too soon, I would be inviting him to follow. Instead, I cleaned the floor with shaking hands, erasing the prints but not the memory. The rest of the day I kept hearing phantom knocks. On the walls, the windows, even the fridge door when I was trying to eat. Always soft, always spaced apart like a question. Tap, pause, tap. My nerves were frayed to nothing by the time night came again. I told myself I would be ready this time, that if he came back, I would confront him directly, demand to know what he wanted. But as the hours dragged on and the shadows thickened, that resolve melted into dread, because deep down I already knew what he wanted. He wanted in, and I was terrified of what might happen if I ever said yes. The morning after I found those muddy prints beside my bed, I told myself I was done pretending this was just imagination. I had tried denial, I had tried ignoring it, and all that had done was let it get closer. That realization sat in my chest like a weight all day. I worked from home but barely managed to get anything done because I kept glancing over my shoulder toward the windows. It did not matter that the sun was up. Every shadow felt like it might stretch into the shape of that boy. By late afternoon, I decided to do something I had been putting off since moving in. I pulled down the old boxes of paperwork left behind in the attic. The air was stale and full of dust, but after hours of digging I finally found what I was looking for. Faded folders, yellowed receipts, scraps of old mail that belonged to the family who had lived here before me. Most of it was useless junk, but one file stopped me cold. It was a missing child flyer, creased and worn, the ink bleeding from years of damp. It was for a boy, about 8 years old, with dark hair and a crooked smile. The photo was grainy, but there was no mistaking it. It was the boy at my window. I sat on the attic floor, staring at that face, my hands shaking so hard I nearly ripped the paper. The flyer said he had vanished from his own bedroom one night and had never been found. The date was almost 15 years ago. My throat went dry. That was the same room I was sleeping in now. That night I could not relax. I left every light in the house on, every curtain drawn, but my body was locked in fight or flight mode. Every sound made me twitch. The hum of the fridge, the ticking of the heater, all of it sounded like footsteps. I tried calling friends just to hear another voice, but no one picked up. Around midnight, exhaustion finally pulled me under. I woke to whispering. At first it was faint, almost like wind through the cracks, but when I held my breath I could hear it clearer. A child's voice, soft, right at the glass. "You are in my room." The words sent an electric chill down my spine. I froze, eyes locked on the shadow of the curtains. My mind screamed at me not to look, but my body betrayed me. I slowly turned my head. The curtain bulged inward like small hands were pressing against it. I stumbled out of bed, heart slamming against my ribs. The whispering followed me as I ran to the hallway. I flicked the light switch, but the bulb popped, plunging me into dimness. Behind me, I heard 3 taps against the window, slow and patient. I barely slept that night, curled up on the couch, too scared to return to the bedroom. When dawn finally came, I forced myself to go back upstairs. The curtain was swaying slightly, even though no windows were open. On the sill was a streak of mud shaped unmistakably like a child's hand. That was when I knew I had to ask more questions. I went back to the older couple next door, clutching the faded flyer like proof I was not losing my mind. The wife took one look and closed the door halfway. "You should not keep that," she said firmly. "Burn it." I asked what had really happened to the boy. She glanced around nervously before answering. He disappeared in the night. No signs of forced entry, no footprints outside. His parents told the police he must have run off, but I knew better. We all did. People had heard things before it happened. Knocks at the windows, whispers, just like you. Her husband came up behind her and shook his head sharply. "That is enough. Do not encourage this. It is not our problem anymore." He shut the door in my face. I stood there shaking with anger and fear. They knew more than they were telling me. They had seen this before, maybe even lived through it, and now they were leaving me to deal with it alone. That evening I tried researching the case online, but there was almost nothing. A brief article about a missing child, a plea from the parents, and then silence. No updates, no follow-ups. As if the story had been buried. The one strange detail mentioned was that the boy's bedroom window had been found open, even though his parents swore they had locked it. That night, I did not even try to sleep upstairs. I dragged a blanket to the living room couch and left the television running for background noise. Around 3 in the morning, the screen flickered and turned to static. My stomach dropped. Out of the white noise came a faint voice, the same soft whisper I had heard at the window. "Let me in." I stared, horrified, as shapes began to swim faintly in the static. At first it was just flickers of light, but then the outline of a child's face pushed through. The eyes were black pits. The mouth was stretched too wide, whispering in sync with the voice. "You are in my room." The television clicked off by itself. The living room was suddenly dark, and from upstairs came the sound of small feet running across the floorboards. I bolted out the front door into the night air, barefoot, clutching nothing but my phone. I stood on the lawn, shaking, staring up at the dark windows of my house. For a split second I thought I saw movement behind the glass. A small shadow, standing where my bed was. I could not go back in until daylight. I waited outside like a lunatic, sitting on the porch swing with my knees pulled to my chest, jumping at every sound. When the sun finally rose, I crept back inside. Everything looked normal. Curtains still drawn, no footprints, no signs of forced entry. But when I checked my phone, my stomach turned. In my gallery was a new photo. I had not taken it. It showed me asleep on the couch, blanket twisted, mouth open, and in the corner of the photo, just barely visible, was the reflection of the boy's face in the dark screen of the television. At that point there was no more denying it. He was not just knocking anymore, he was already inside. The photo on my phone was the breaking point. Seeing that pale face reflected in the dark screen while I lay defenseless made me realize I was running out of time. It was no longer about knocks or whispers at the window. He had already stepped inside, and if he could take a photo of me while I was sleeping, what was stopping him from going further? I deleted the picture, but it did not help. The image was burned into my brain. I kept picturing myself lying there unaware while something else moved through my house, watching, maybe even touching the things I thought of as mine. It was not just an intruder. It was a child who no longer belonged to this world, and for some reason he had chosen me. That day, I called in sick to work. I could not focus on anything except getting answers. I drove across town to the library and spent hours combing through old newspaper archives. I found 2 short articles about the boy's disappearance. Both were vague, but one had a quote from a neighbor who said the parents had been acting strangely in the weeks leading up to it. Strange noises in the night, curtains moving when there was no wind, and the boy telling classmates he had a friend who visited his window. The name of the neighbor was familiar. It was the older man who had shut the door in my face. I thought about going back to confront him, but when I pulled into my driveway that evening, all the air left my chest. My bedroom curtain was open. I never left it open. From the street I could see straight into the room, and for the briefest moment I thought I saw someone standing there. Not clearly, just the shape of a head and shoulders. By the time I blinked, it was gone. I did not want to go inside, but I forced myself to. I could not live in fear forever. I climbed the stairs, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. The curtain was swaying slightly when I reached the room, though no window was open. On the sill was another streak of mud, fresh and dark against the paint. That night I decided to sleep in my car. I parked a few streets away where I had a clear view of the house. I kept the seat upright and told myself I would stay awake, but exhaustion crept in. I must have drifted off because when I opened my eyes again, the sky was still dark and my phone said it was just past 3 in the morning. The house was silent, no lights, no movement. But then I noticed something that made my skin crawl. A small figure stood at my bedroom window. From this distance it looked like a child's outline, still as stone, staring out into the street. My breath caught in my throat. Even after I rubbed my eyes and looked again, it was still there, watching. The next morning, I felt like I was losing my mind. I had not truly slept in days, and the lack of rest was gnawing at me. I needed someone else to witness it, to prove I was not just imagining all of this. I called my sister and begged her to come over for the night. She thought I was being paranoid, but eventually she agreed. When she arrived, I explained everything, though I left out the photo. She would not have believed me anyway. We set up camp in the living room, lights on, television playing softly. Hours passed uneventfully, and I started to feel embarrassed. Maybe nothing would happen with her there. Maybe whatever this was only wanted me alone. But around the same cursed time, the tapping began, soft, deliberate, against the living room window. My sister frowned and pulled the curtain back before I could stop her. Her face drained of color. "What the hell is that?" she whispered. I looked, and there he was, the boy, his face pressed against the glass, eyes too dark, too empty. His lips moved, though no sound came through. My sister stumbled back, clutching my arm so hard her nails dug into my skin. We watched, frozen, until he turned and vanished into the night without a sound. She refused to stay another minute. She left in tears, telling me to get out of the house before something worse happened. I wanted to follow her, but something inside me twisted. If I left, would he follow me wherever I went? Would I bring him into her home, into my family's lives? The thought made me sick. This was mine to deal with. That night I locked every door, every window, and tried to steel myself for whatever came next. I sat awake in bed, gripping a baseball bat, my eyes glued to the curtains. Hours crawled by. At first, nothing happened. No tapping, no whispers. I thought maybe he would not come back after being seen by someone else. Then the baby monitor crackled to life. I had not used it in months, but I kept it in a drawer after the last tenants left it behind. I had not even realized it was plugged in. The speaker hissed with static. Then a soft voice emerged. "You are in my room." The words were slow, stretched out, spoken with the calm certainty of someone who had waited a long time. My skin prickled as I stared at the monitor sitting dark and lifeless on the dresser. The voice came again, this time louder. "You are in my room." I could not take it anymore. I grabbed the bat and yanked the curtain open. The window was empty. For a moment I thought maybe it had finally ended. Then I looked down. On the floorboards below the sill were fresh, muddy footprints. Small, bare, and pointed inward. Not outside anymore. Inside. The bat slipped from my hand and clattered to the ground. Every instinct told me to run, but my legs locked. The house was silent except for the faint creak of floorboards from the hallway. Slow, deliberate, moving toward me. That was the moment I realized it was not about the house at all. It was about me. He did not just want his room back. He wanted me out of it, one way or another. The muddy footprints did not fade overnight. They stained the floorboards in my bedroom like bruises on skin, dark smears that made it impossible to convince myself I had only imagined them. I scrubbed at them until my hands ached, but the stains would not lift. It was as if the wood itself had absorbed whatever filth he had carried inside. For 2 nights after, the boy never appeared at the window. No tapping, no whispers, no pale face pressed against the glass. The silence was almost worse. It made me feel like he was hiding, waiting, studying me in ways I could not see. I barely slept, jolting awake at the slightest sound. The creak of settling wood sounded like footsteps. The rustle of branches against the siding sounded like fingers tracing the walls. On the 3rd night I woke to the smell of earth. Damp soil, thick and cloying, like a freshly dug grave. It clung to the air, coating my throat when I breathed in. I gagged and stumbled out of bed, only to realize the smell was strongest in the hallway. Against my better judgment, I followed it. The trail led me to the closet at the far end of the hall. I stood there shivering, hand on the knob, my mind screaming at me not to open it. But the silence pressed in until I could not stand it anymore. I yanked the door wide and shone my phone's flashlight inside. The closet was empty, except for a single sheet of paper resting on the floor, a child's crayon drawing. It was crude but clear enough to make my stomach drop. A stick figure version of me, lying in bed. Another smaller figure standing beside me, its hands resting on my chest. Above them, written in shaky letters, were the words, "He is mine." I dropped the paper like it burned me. My first thought was that the kids who lived here before had drawn it, that maybe it had been left behind and somehow worked its way out of a forgotten box. But deep down I knew better. The crayons were not faded. The paper was not yellowed with age. This was new. I wanted to leave right then, to get in the car and drive until the gas ran out. But every time I thought about it, my chest tightened. Where would I even go? A hotel would not stop him. My sister had seen him. He would follow. There was nowhere to run. The next day I finally broke and tried calling a priest. I did not even know what I planned to say. How do you explain that a dead child is knocking at your window every night without sounding insane? I stammered through half a story about a haunting, but the priest cut me off and said they did not do that sort of thing anymore. I hung up, humiliated and hopeless. That night was worse. I had barricaded the window with heavy furniture, pushing the dresser against it and stacking boxes on top. It gave me a false sense of safety for all of an hour before I woke again to tapping. Not on the window, from under the bed. Each knock echoed up through the mattress, deliberate and steady. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 more. The exact rhythm he had used on the glass. My breath caught in my throat as I realized he did not need the window anymore. He was already inside. I bolted from the room, too scared to even grab the bat this time. I ran down the stairs and out the front door into the cold night air. My neighbors must have seen me sitting on the curb in my pajamas, shaking, but no one came to ask questions. I sat there until dawn broke, and the sunlight gave me just enough courage to step back inside. The house felt heavier in the daylight. It was like the walls were holding their breath, waiting for night to fall again. I tried to distract myself by cleaning, but every time I bent down to pick something up, I swore I saw movement in the corners of my vision. Pale shapes darting just out of sight. Once I caught myself staring into the hallway mirror for too long and realized the reflection was not perfectly matching me. It was delayed, like it was thinking before moving. By evening I was exhausted, drained from fear and lack of sleep. I curled up on the couch instead of my bed, too terrified to go back upstairs. I kept all the lights on, television humming, phone clutched tight in my hand. Hours crawled by without incident, and against my better judgment, my eyelids grew heavy. I woke to silence. The television was off. The lamps were off. The entire house was drenched in darkness. My phone screen would not turn on no matter how many times I pressed it. Then I heard breathing. Not mine. Not from outside. It was inside the room with me. Slow, steady inhales and exhales, close enough that I could feel the air shift against my skin. My heart pounded as I reached for the lamp, fumbling with the switch, but it would not turn on. I forced myself to sit up and glance around the room. That was when I saw him. The boy stood in the corner near the kitchen doorway, barefoot, clothes caked in mud, his head tilted at an unnatural angle as he watched me. The darkness hid most of his features, but his eyes were visible. Too wide, too dark, fixed unblinking on me. "You are in my room," he whispered. The same words from the monitor, from the drawing, spoken in that soft, patient voice. I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. I could only sit there frozen as he took one slow step forward, then another. The lamp flickered suddenly back to life, filling the room with light. He was gone. I sat shaking on the couch until sunrise, every light burning, refusing to close my eyes. I could not deny it anymore. This was not a trick of the imagination. This was not a dream or sleep paralysis. He was real, and he wanted me out. I knew I had only two choices left: leave the house for good, or face him head on. I made up my mind the morning after he whispered to me in the living room. My hands still trembled, my throat was raw from breathing shallow all night, but I knew there was no surviving another night in that house. He had made it clear. It was not my room. It was not my house. I was just an intruder squatting in something that still belonged to him. The hardest part was admitting it. I had signed the lease. I had spent my savings trying to make the place feel like home. But a home should not watch you. A home should not breathe when you are trying to sleep. A home should not whisper your name in a child's voice that does not belong to any living child. I packed in a daze, clothes thrown into garbage bags, toothbrush still wet with paste, shoved into a side pocket. I left furniture, dishes, everything I could not carry in 2 trips. I just wanted distance. My heart beat so hard it felt like it might burst as I dragged the last bag to my car. I did not even lock the front door. When I backed down the driveway, I caught myself glancing at the bedroom window. For a split second I swore I saw him standing there again, the pale outline of a boy too thin, too still, his head cocked in that unnatural way. My tires screeched as I sped away. For the first time in weeks, I slept. It was in my sister's spare room, on a mattress too soft with blankets that smelled like her detergent. But no knocking woke me. No muddy footprints appeared. Morning light poured through the blinds, and for a moment I cried with relief. The relief lasted 3 days. On the 4th morning my phone buzzed, an unknown number. I opened the message and froze. A picture of my old house. The angle was from the front yard. The caption read, "You forgot something." My stomach dropped as I noticed what was in the photo. The curtains of the bedroom window were open. Pinned against the glass was a piece of paper. My paper. My handwriting. A note I had taped above my desk weeks ago that said, "Breathe." Something had torn it down and pressed it against the glass just for the picture. I deleted the message and told myself it was a prank, but that night my niece shook me awake. Her eyes were wide, voice hushed with fear. She said she had heard tapping on her window. She said a boy was outside asking for me. I wanted to deny it, but when I crept into her room, the truth was there. Small, muddy prints smeared across the sill, the cold smell of wet earth hanging in the air. I stood there with my head spinning, realizing he had not stayed behind. He had followed me. I knew then running was not enough. I had to end it. The next day, I drove back to the neighborhood. My chest tightened as I pulled up to the house I had abandoned. It looked different now, more decayed in just a week. Weeds pushing higher through the yard, paint peeling faster, as though time itself was rotting it. But the window was still there, curtains open, waiting. I parked down the street and walked to the neighbors. An older woman answered, someone I had nodded to in passing but never really spoken with. When I asked about the boy, her face tightened like she had been expecting the question. She told me quietly that yes, a boy had lived there once, the family before me. He was 8 when he vanished. One night, he went to bed, and by morning his room was empty. No forced entry, no open windows, just gone. The parents eventually moved away, unable to stay. I asked if the police had searched. She nodded. Every inch of the house, every yard of the woods nearby. Nothing. Just a missing child case that turned cold. Her voice dropped lower. She said she had seen lights on in that house some nights, even before I moved in. Heard noises when no one was supposed to be there. She had never dared go inside. "That place belongs to him now," she whispered. That night, I returned with one goal: to confront him, to tell him he had to let me go. It felt foolish, but I had no other choice. I stepped into the living room, flashlight trembling in my hand. The air was stale, thick with that same earthy smell. My footsteps echoed too loud against the walls. I climbed the stairs, every creak sounding like a warning. At the top, I turned toward the bedroom. The door was half open, like it had been waiting for me. Inside, the room was colder than the rest of the house. The dresser I had used to barricade the window was shoved aside. The glass was bare, and he was there. The boy stood in the center of the room, bare feet pressed into the floorboards, eyes darker than the night outside. He tilted his head the way he always did, studying me like I was the ghost. "This is my room," he whispered. My throat tightened. "I know," I said, voice shaking. "It's yours. I am leaving. I will not come back. But you need to stop following me. You need to stay here." His lips curled into the faintest smile. It was not cruel, not kind, just empty. "You came in," he said. "Now you stay." The air grew colder. I saw my breath fog in the beam of my flashlight. The shadows stretched along the walls, curling like fingers. I did the only thing I could think of. I dropped the flashlight and bolted. Down the stairs, through the front door, out into the night. I did not stop running until I reached the car. I drove with tears blurring my vision, the house shrinking in the rearview mirror. I never went back. I cut ties with the landlord, paid out what I owed, and refused to answer questions. I moved 2 towns over, into a cramped apartment with too many locks. And for the first time in months, the nights grew quiet again. No tapping, no muddy prints, no whispers. The boy had gotten what he wanted. The house was his. I had given it back. It has been over a year now. I still wake sometimes at 3 in the morning, heart racing, convinced I will hear that knock on the glass. But the windows stay silent. The rooms stay empty. And I know better than to ever go near that street again. Because some houses are not meant for us. Some rooms will never truly belong to the living. And if you ever hear a child's voice outside your window asking to come in, do not answer. Do not look. Do not listen. Just leave. Before he decides you are the one in his room. Okay, I don't really know how to start this, but it's been eating at me for weeks, and writing it out is the only thing that feels halfway sane. I'm not claiming this is paranormal or anything. I don't even know what this is, but it happened. It's still happening, I think. I live in Manchester Rusholme specifically, and I work late shifts at this cafe near the city center, off Portland Street. Small place, nothing fancy. We close around 7 most nights. My shifts are usually afternoon till close, which means I'm the one locking up while the city's just starting to wind down. There's a lot of foot traffic during the day, but in the evenings it gets quieter. Still safe enough though. You get your usual people hanging around, delivery drivers, office folks, uni students, a few regulars who linger on their phones a bit too long. It never bothered me. Until I noticed the car. It was just a silver Peugeot, I think a 307. I'm not great with models, but it was one of those older ones with slightly fogged out headlights and a dent near the back wheel. The first time I noticed it, I didn't think much of it. It was parked directly across from the cafe. Nothing weird. Just sitting there, engine off, windows up. No one got out. I assumed someone was waiting for a partner, or maybe just finishing a phone call. That's normal. We're right by a pharmacy and 2 takeaways people idle there all the time. But then I noticed it again the next night. Same car, same spot, same time. Still, I brushed it off. Maybe someone lived nearby. Maybe it was coincidence. But by the 4th night in a row, it was getting harder to pretend I wasn't clocking it. And then, after the 5th night, I decided to test it. I left through the back entrance, cut through the side alley, and looped around on foot to the main road. I stood behind a lamppost across the street and watched. The car was still there, headlights off, but I could just make out a silhouette in the driver's seat, not moving, just sitting. I stood there for 10 minutes, no movement, no one got out. Eventually I gave up and walked home, trying to tell myself I was being paranoid, that I was projecting some podcast I'd listened to onto a tired commuter. I didn't see it again that week. I figured that was the end of it. Until the following Tuesday. I went to my gym after work. It's about 20 minutes away in Salford. Tiny place above a chemist's, nothing fancy. I got out around 9:30, and there it was. Same silver car. Parked just a bit down from the entrance. Windows fogged up from the cold. Headlights off. I didn't see the person inside until I was directly across from it. He didn't move. Didn't turn his head. But I knew he saw me. You know when you just feel someone looking right at you, that heavy pressure on your back. I kept walking, didn't even glance directly at the car, just went around the corner and stood behind a skip until I was sure I wasn't being followed. I don't know why I didn't call anyone. I guess I didn't want to sound dramatic. What was I going to say? There's a car that keeps appearing wherever I go. It sounded unhinged even in my own head. Plus, no one had actually done anything. It got worse when I saw it outside my flat. Rusham's a busy area, loads of parking turnover. I usually have to leave my car 2 or 3 streets away. But that night, I came home from a late Tesco run, and there it was parked directly across from my building's front door. Same dent, same shape. I stood there with my shopping bag, staring at it like an idiot. Still, no movement, no lights, no sound. Just presence. I texted my sister, told her I was feeling weird, didn't mention the car. She offered to let me stay the night at hers, but I brushed it off, said I was just overtired. I barely slept. The next time I saw the car was somewhere it definitely shouldn't have been. My sister's wedding. It was a small venue out in Cheshire, countryside vibes, private access. No public parking nearby, all guests had to be on a list for the reception. It had been a long day. My nerves were already fried, and I'd just stepped outside to get some air when I saw it. Parked at the edge of the lot, slightly hidden behind a tall hedge, silver Peugeot, same weird dent, same off-kilter alignment of the back wheel. I don't remember walking toward it, but I did. I got close enough to see that the inside was empty this time, no driver, but the driver's seat was reclined all the way back, like someone had just been lying there. I turned and walked straight to the event manager and asked her if she had the guest list for vehicles. She said she did. I asked if a silver Peugeot was on it. It wasn't. I told her it didn't belong to anyone, and someone came out to check. By the time we got back to the lot, less than 5 minutes, the car was gone. I didn't say anything to my sister. I didn't want to ruin her day, but something shifted for me that night. Whatever this was, it wasn't random. This car was following me, but not in the way you see in movies, not tailing me down streets or chasing me through alleyways. It just appeared, always still, always watching. I decided to go to the police. They were polite but predictably unhelpful. I gave them everything: make, color, rough plate numbers. They took it all down, said they'd look into it. Probably just a misunderstanding. Someone with a similar routine, maybe an ex I'd forgotten to mention. But the next day, an officer called me back. And this is when things tipped from unnerving to downright wrong. He said the plate matched a vehicle that had been declared scrapped 6 months ago, totaled in a collision, written off, no insurance, officially destroyed. The scrapyard logs even had a receipt and timestamp. But that car, the same car, was still appearing wherever I went. I told the officer that, and he got quiet. Said they'd look into it again. I haven't heard back. The final straw happened 2 nights ago. I was walking to my car, parked just off Wilmslow Road. It was late, cold, light drizzle. I opened the door, got in, and something fluttered on my windscreen. A note, folded, plain paper, no envelope. It read, "I liked the blue dress better. Tomorrow you'll wear it again." No name, no handwriting I recognized, nothing else. And I had worn a blue dress 2 nights earlier, once, briefly, to a birthday party I barely mentioned to anyone. I didn't tell anyone about the note until now. I don't know what this is. I don't know if it's a stalker or something else entirely, but the silver car is real. The man, whoever he is, he's watching. And now he knows what I'm going to wear tomorrow. I'm scared to find out what happens if I don't. I didn't wear the dress. I thought about it, stared at it hanging on the back of my wardrobe door for a long time the next morning. Blue, simple, a bit wrinkled. I'd worn it to a friend's birthday at a pub in Didsbury. Nothing fancy. I almost forgot I owned it. But the note had changed everything. I couldn't wear it. Not after that. It felt like giving permission. I wore jeans and a hoodie instead, kept my hair up in a bun, no makeup, left the house around 11, later than usual, made sure I walked in a different direction to get to the bus stop. I didn't want to drive, didn't want to risk going back to the car and finding something else waiting for me under the wiper. The whole way into town I kept checking behind me. Every corner, every crossing, nothing. Just other people doing their normal routines. But that was the thing, wasn't it? Whoever this was, if it was a person, they didn't act like someone out for attention. They weren't trying to scare me in the open. It was all quiet, intentional, measured. By the time I got to the cafe, I was already exhausted. I didn't mention the note to anyone at work. I wanted to badly, but how do you bring something like that up? Oh, by the way, someone might be stalking me and possibly knows where I live, what I wear, and who I talk to. Doesn't exactly roll off the tongue in a break room conversation. Around 4 p.m., I started feeling this tightness in my chest. Not a full-blown panic attack, I've had those. I know what they feel like, but more like a weight. Like I was being pushed toward a moment I couldn't name yet, a slow, thick dread. I kept glancing out the front window between customers. The view of the street wasn't perfect, buses blocking parts of the curb, people stopping to check their phones, but I kept looking anyway. At 6:47, the silver car was there. Right across the road, same spot as the first time I ever noticed it, parked parallel to the cafe's big window, as if it had never moved. I didn't even see it arrive. It was just there. I couldn't see the driver, not clearly. The windows were tinted, and it was dark out, but I swear there was someone sitting behind the wheel, not moving, no phone out, no radio glare. I must have frozen for a full minute, I heard Gemma behind me, she was doing the till, ask if I was all right. I mumbled something about being tired and stepped into the back, hands shaking. I tried to call the police again. They didn't answer, or rather, they did, but it was a switchboard. I was on hold for almost 10 minutes, and by the time someone picked up, I was already spiraling into this weird mental loop where I doubted everything. What if it's not the same car? What if I'm just seeing what I'm afraid to see? What if someone I know is messing with me? But then, the note. That wasn't imagined. It was real, tucked under my wiper blade like a warning wrapped in politeness. The officer who finally came on the line was kind. She listened, took my details again. I asked if anyone had followed up on the registration number. She went quiet for a second, then said, "It's still listed as scrapped. There shouldn't be a vehicle matching that description on the road." I asked if it could be cloned plates, someone using the number from a destroyed car to avoid tracking. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. She just told me to keep a record, write things down, take pictures if I felt safe doing so, and not to approach the vehicle, as if I wanted to get close to it. I hung up, told Gemma I had a headache and needed to leave a bit early. She was sweet about it, said she'd finish the close. I left through the front, but took a wide route around the car, pretended to be on my phone, didn't look directly at the windows, just enough of a glance to confirm, yeah. There was definitely someone inside. Pale face, maybe male, sitting too still. I walked 5 blocks out of my way before calling an Uber. I was halfway home when I realized what scared me most wasn't the fact the car was still following me. It was that I hadn't seen it following me. No movement, no sound. It was just always where I was about to be. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed on the couch with the curtains half drawn and the kitchen light on. Every 30 minutes, I peeked out the window. At 3:12 a.m., I saw it again. Parked on the opposite side of the road, no headlights, no interior light, just a dull reflection of the street lamp in its windshield. I took a photo this time, through the glass, zoomed in. The image came out blurry, but you can make out the car, and if you squint, a pale outline behind the steering wheel. But the part that turned my stomach wasn't the photo. It was when I looked at the time stamp, 3:12 a.m. The exact time I woke up the night before from a dream I couldn't remember, only that someone had whispered my name in it. And that night, I hadn't looked out the window. What if it had been there then too? What if it always had been? I sent the photo to my sister. Didn't say much, just, "Seen this car around your place?" She texted back 5 minutes later. "No, but I've seen it near Mum's." My blood ran cold. Mum lives in a retirement flat near the edge of Levenshulme. She doesn't drive anymore. Never had a reason to. I hadn't told her anything, hadn't mentioned the car, neither had my sister. But apparently, the silver Peugeot had been spotted there too. This isn't just about me anymore. Whoever's in that car, if it even is a person, they're expanding the circle. And I don't think they're watching me for fun. I think they're waiting for me to do something, or not do something. And I still haven't worn the blue dress. It started with the dress, right? The blue one. The note said I'd wear it again. I still hadn't, And maybe that was the problem, because things started changing after that. I don't mean in the usual stalker horror movie kind of way. No broken windows, no dead pets, no heavy breathing phone calls, just little things. Small, precise shifts in my routine that I didn't make. It started on Thursday morning. I left my flat around 9, like I always do, to grab a coffee and get some air before work. I'm a creature of habit. I go to the same cafe on the corner, sit at the window seat, order a flat white, always pay cash. But that day, the barista smiled at me and said, "Back again? Twice in one morning?" I blinked. "Sorry. You just came in, like half an hour ago." I shook my head. "No, I didn't." He laughed awkwardly, like he thought I was joking. "Well, someone who looked like you did. Same jacket, even the same earrings." I laughed it off too, played along, but inside, my chest was tightening. I hadn't been there earlier. I know I hadn't. I looked around the cafe like maybe someone was still there, someone copying me, mimicking me. But the place was nearly empty, just a couple of students and an old man reading a newspaper. I tried to brush it off, went to work, didn't mention it to anyone. But then, later that night, my phone buzzed, a text from my sister. "Hey, are you still here? You left your scarf." I stared at it for a full minute before replying. "Where?" "Mum's place. You were just here like an hour ago. Had tea, remember?" I hadn't been there in 3 days. I called her immediately. She picked up on the second ring. "What's going on?" I asked. She sounded confused. "What do you mean?" "I wasn't at Mum's today." There was a pause. "Are you messing with me?" "No, I'm serious." "Well, someone who looked exactly like you was. Same hair, same bloody laugh. Mum even said you seemed a bit quiet." My mouth went dry. "I've been at work all day," I whispered. "You sure you're okay?" I hung up. That night, I didn't even try to sleep. I just sat on the floor of my living room, back against the sofa, listening to the quiet hum of the fridge and the occasional hiss of wind through the cracked window. At 2:54 a.m., a car drove past my building. I didn't see it, but I heard it. That specific engine sound low and uneven, like something not quite tuned right, and then the slow crunch of tires on gravel as it eased to a stop. I didn't move, didn't look, but my whole body was locked in place. A minute later, my phone vibrated. No number, just a single message. "She wears it better." I didn't respond. I don't think I even breathed. I don't remember falling asleep, but when I woke up, the sun was rising and my front door was locked. I checked my closet. The blue dress was still there, but it wasn't hanging on the hook where I'd left it. It was folded neatly on my bed, like someone had laid it out for me. That morning, I called in sick to work and took a cab straight to the police station. I brought the photo I'd taken of the car, printed the texts, even brought the dress, the folded one. I didn't know what I thought they'd do with it, test it for prints, fibers, blood. The officer I spoke to was polite, but his eyes glazed over halfway through. He nodded a lot, jotted things down, gave me a leaflet about personal safety. He suggested I see someone, as in A therapist? I asked, voice flat. Well, just to talk through everything. Might help you make sense of it. Would you say that to someone who brought in a break? In report? He didn't answer. I left with nothing. That night, I wore the dress. I know, I shouldn't have, but I wanted to control something. It felt like I was being handled, like my own life had been put on rails, and someone else had the schedule. Wearing it felt like flipping the script, like if I wore it on my terms, it wouldn't mean what they thought it did. I went to the pub near my old uni, loud, busy, familiar, lots of bodies, lots of noise. I sat with a friend from work, didn't drink much, kept checking the window. No sign of the car, no texts, no notes. I felt okay until I went to the toilet. It was one of those grimy, mirror-lined loose where everything echoes. I was washing my hands, not really looking up, when I noticed something in the mirror behind me. A woman, standing just outside the stall area, wearing the same dress. Same cut, same color, but not mine. It fit her differently, looser at the shoulders, longer at the hem. Her hair was darker than mine, pulled back tight. I turned around fast. No one was there. I ran back out into the pub. My friend looked up like nothing had happened. I asked if she saw anyone come from the toilets. She shook her head. You okay? I think someone's following me. Do you want me to call someone? No, I said, suddenly unsure of who someone even was anymore. I left early, took a cab home, told myself I'd imagined it, until I walked into my flat and saw the scarf. The one I supposedly left at Mum's place, folded on my kitchen counter. My sister hadn't been by. I texted her just to check. She hadn't touched it. That night, I took a video, just one, of my front door. I set up my phone on a stack of books, hit record, and let it run while I slept, or at least while I laid still and pretended to. The next morning, I checked the footage. Nothing for the first few hours. But at 3:12 a.m., there's a flicker of movement. The sound of a key turning in the lock. The door opens. And in the doorway, just for a second, you see someone wearing the blue dress. My blue dress. Only it wasn't me, because I was already lying in bed, watching, frozen. She didn't come in. She just stood there. And then she smiled. I didn't show the video to anyone. I should have. I know that. But when you watch something like that, truly watch it, frame by frame, over and over again, it stops feeling like proof and starts feeling like a trap. Like if you show it to someone else, you're inviting them into it too. You're saying, here, carry this with me. Try sleeping now. So I kept it to myself. And then I deleted it. Not because I wanted to, but because something about keeping it like a cursed object felt worse than not having it at all. I'd already watched it too many times. That moment where the door unlocks, creaks open, the sound of the hinges, and then her, standing in my doorway, wearing my dress, with my face, but not exactly my face. I couldn't explain it to myself at the time, but I know now what was wrong. She didn't blink, not once. She stood there for 16 full seconds, I counted, just looking in, eyes locked on the direction of the camera. No blinking. And then she smiled. Not in a creepy, exaggerated way, just slight, familiar, the kind of smile I'd give a friend I haven't seen in years. Then the door quietly closed again. Locked. The sound of footsteps fading down the hall. That was 3 nights ago. And since then, everything's been different. I don't mean that in a dramatic way, like the world turned upside down. I mean it in that unnerving, gut-sick way, where everything around you keeps going, but you know something's shifted. Everyone still says good morning the same way. The same adverts play on the tram. The cafe still sells the same lukewarm almond croissants, but there's a layer missing, or maybe added. Something between me and the world now, a thin sheet of glass, and I'm on the wrong side. I went to work the day after the video, even though I didn't sleep. I thought maybe keeping busy would help. It didn't. I was quieter than usual. People asked if I was okay, and I said I had a cold. One guy joked that I looked like I'd seen a ghost. I laughed. At 3:15 p.m., I went out back to dump the bins and saw the silver Peugeot parked across the road again. Not on our street, not directly outside the cafe, just around the corner, facing away, but unmistakable. I looked at it too long, I know I did. The windows were darker this time, or maybe the light was just different. I couldn't see inside. I wanted to walk up to it, knock on the window, say something, anything. But my legs wouldn't move. Not toward it, not anymore. And then, right before I turned to go back inside, the brake lights flashed. Just once. That night I stayed with my friend Lottie. I didn't tell her everything, but I said enough to make her concerned. She let me crash on her sofa, made tea, didn't ask too many questions. I think she assumed I was dealing with some bad relationship drama, maybe an ex I hadn't told her about. I let her think that. It's easier than saying, there's a woman who looks exactly like me wearing my clothes and entering my flat at night while a car that shouldn't exist follows me everywhere I go. She offered to drive me to the police again, and I almost said yes. But then I remembered the officer's face, the blank way he looked at me when I mentioned the registration, like he'd heard it before, like he knew something, but wouldn't or couldn't say it. I slept for the first time in days at Lottie's. No dreams. No visits. No dress. I woke up feeling almost normal, until I checked my phone. New message. You left the light on. I turned it off for you. No number. No reply option. Attached was a photo, taken from inside my flat. Living room, couch, blanket crumpled in the corner, TV remote on the armrest, the lamp beside the bookshelf, glowing softly. It had been off when I left, and in the corner of the frame, you could see just a sliver of someone's arm, wearing blue. I didn't tell Lottie. I thanked her, made an excuse about early shifts, and left. I went back to my flat around midday, heart pounding so hard it felt like my ribs would split. Nothing was out of place. The door was locked, no signs of forced entry. The window was shut, The blanket was folded differently, but that could have been my memory playing tricks. Except it wasn't, because on the kitchen counter was another note. Folded, no envelope, same handwriting as the first. Don't leave the light on again, it makes you look tired. That's when I broke. Not in the scream and cry kind of way, just a quiet, full-body shutdown. I sat on the floor, back against the fridge, knees pulled up, and just stopped. Stopped trying to understand. Stopped trying to rationalize. There's only so much your brain can do before it runs out of plausible explanations. I stayed there until it got dark. And when I finally moved, it was to unplug every lamp, every appliance, every source of light in the flat. I covered the windows with spare towels and garbage bags, taped them shut, turned off my phone, turned off everything. I didn't want to be seen anymore. Not by her. Not by whoever's in that car. Not by anything. I laid down in the dark and told myself I wouldn't sleep. But I did. And I dreamed. She was standing over me, wearing the dress. Her face was inches from mine, and she wasn't smiling this time. She said in my own voice, "You can't keep hiding. You were never meant to stay separate." Then she reached down and touched my hand. And I woke up. In the dress. In the hallway. Front door wide open. I didn't move right away. I stood in the doorway, barefoot, half inside, half out, the cold air pulling at the hem of the blue dress. The same dress. I could feel it on my skin like it didn't belong there. Like it was wearing me instead of the other way around. I looked down and saw my keys in my hand, not held, clenched. My knuckles were white, my other hand was shaking. The hallway was empty, quiet, lights humming overhead. My upstairs neighbor's shoes were still tucked beside his door, and the carpet hadn't been disturbed. Nothing looked out of place, and that somehow made it worse. Everything around me was ordinary. It was me that wasn't. I stepped back inside, closed the door, locked it, twice. The flat was dark. I'd left it that way. No lamps, no light from the TV, nothing that could draw attention. But now it felt like something had been here while I was out of it. The air felt different. Tighter, like walking into a room where someone had just had a quiet argument. I walked to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. It was me. I think. But my eyes looked too alert, too steady for someone who'd just woken up in a hallway wearing a dress she hadn't put on. I took it off, folded it, stuffed it into a tote bag, and shoved it into the cupboard under the sink. Then I took a hoodie from the back of the chair and pulled it on, sleeves too long, the familiar smell of detergent and fabric softener grounding me, barely. I sat on the couch and tried to piece together a timeline. I remembered unplugging the lamps. I remembered laying on the floor in the dark, and then, nothing, no dream, no sound. Just waking up where I shouldn't have been, in clothes I didn't remember putting on. I checked the windows, still covered. I checked the door locked from the inside. So how had I ended up outside it? And why the dress? Why always the dress? I turned my phone back on. One new message. No number, no sender. We're almost aligned. That was all it said. I deleted it, Then I took the SIM card out and broke it in half. I spent the rest of that day cleaning. It wasn't rational, but I needed to move, needed to do something tactile. I scrubbed the bathroom even though it was clean. Took everything out of the kitchen drawers and reorganized them. Washed bedding that wasn't dirty. I was trying to push her out. Whatever version of me was bleeding into this one, the girl in the doorway, the girl in the mirror. I didn't want her here. I didn't want to be her. But you can only scrub a floor so many times before you start to see the shape of your own shadow stretched out across it. And then all you have left is the quiet and the waiting. That night, I didn't sleep at all. Just sat in the chair by the door, listening. At exactly 3:12 a.m., the hallway light outside my flat flickered. Just once. Then silence. The next morning I made a decision. I packed a bag. Basics only: toothbrush, chargers, leggings, jumper. Left the dress in the cupboard under the sink, still in the tote. Didn't touch it. I texted my mom, told her I needed a break. She didn't ask questions, just said of course I could stay with her. But I didn't go straight there. I went to the scrapyard. The one the police had said the Peugeot had been registered to. I'd remembered the name from the report's small place on the outskirts near Oldham, industrial estate with a row of mechanics and a fish and chip shop that always smells slightly burnt. I got there around 11. There was a man at the front in a high-vis vest, sipping from a thermos. He looked up as I approached. "Need something?" "I'm looking for a car," I said, trying to sound casual. "Silver Peugeot. Scrap claim was filed 6 months ago. Might have been a 307. He raised an eyebrow. "You a cop?" "No," I said quickly. "Personal reasons." He gave me a long look, then shrugged. "You'll need the reg number." I gave it to him. I'd memorized it. He walked off toward the office, and I waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. He didn't come back. Finally, I walked over to the door and pushed it open. Empty. No one inside. No sign of him. Just a radio playing quietly in the background and a stack of folders on the desk. I scanned the top page. Nothing helpful. Names, dates, makes, models. Then I saw one labeled Incident, Staff Note. Curiosity overruled everything. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No letterhead, no signature, just typed text. Vehicle scrap request processed manually. No visual confirmation of vehicle at time of disposal. Record generated via third-party intake. Then, handwritten beneath it. This one came from nowhere. No tow, no drop-off. Just a number. No sign it was ever on the lot. I put the file back exactly as I found it and left. I didn't stop moving until I got to my mom's. She was waiting with tea and biscuits like I'd just come back from holiday. I tried to act normal. We talked about her garden, about the neighbor's cat, about whether or not she should get a new kettle. I didn't tell her anything. Not about the messages. Not about the mirror. Not about the dress. Not about the car that was apparently never scrapped because it had never been there in the first place. I didn't sleep much that night either, but at least it felt safer. Until the morning, when I opened the curtains in the guest room and saw the silver Peugeot parked across the road. Same dent, Same angle, facing directly at the house. And on the window, in the condensation, someone had written, "Soon." I stood there at the window for a long time. Longer than made sense, longer than was safe. The message on the window soon had already started to fade in the sunlight. A thin sheen of dew rolled down the glass, dragging the letters with it until they blurred into nothing. But I kept staring at that car. The silver Peugeot, same dull paint, same dent by the rear tire, like it had never moved, never aged, never changed. It was just there, as it always had been. I didn't tell Mum. She was downstairs making toast, humming like nothing was wrong. And honestly, I didn't want to drag her into this, not when I didn't even know what this was. After a minute, I stepped back from the window, took a breath, and decided, no more running. No more hiding at friends' flats, no more staring at screens, waiting for the next message, or the next dream, or the next visit. I was going to end it. I put on my coat, grabbed my bag, and walked out the door before I could talk myself out of it. The car didn't move. Didn't so much as twitch. I walked straight toward it, crossed the road, no hesitation this time. I reached the driver's side window and looked in. Empty. Again. But it wasn't just empty, it was wrong. There was no dust on the dashboard, no scratches on the wheel, no wear on the seat. It looked unused. Like it had been set dressed to look lived in, a prop more than a machine. And in the cup holder, folded neatly, was another note. I didn't want to touch it, but I did. Thank you for staying the course. The mirror has been calibrated. That was all it said. I stood there holding it, stomach dropping, heart weirdly calm. The note didn't feel threatening. It felt final, like a signed invoice after a long project. I walked around to the front of the car and looked for a plate. There wasn't one. Not even a bracket. I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually the passenger door unlocked by itself. A soft click, no sound from the locks, no movement from inside, just an invitation. And I took it. Because I had to. Because whatever this thing was, a person, a program, a version of me or something else, it had built itself around my life, my patterns, my choices, my face. And I needed to understand why. I got in. The interior was cold, not freezing, just sterile, like the air didn't come from outside. The radio was on, tuned to white noise, no station, no voice. I waited. Nothing happened. Then the rearview mirror flickered, not physically, like a screen glitching, and suddenly it wasn't showing the street behind us. It was showing me, in my flat. Not me, now, me yesterday, lying on the floor, the blue dress folded next to me, eyes closed, completely still. Then the image shifted. The same flat, but someone else was standing over me. Same height, same hair, different face. Mine, but not. And I understood. She wasn't stalking me. She wasn't copying me. She was replacing me. And now that the mirror was calibrated, whatever that meant, the change was complete. I looked at my hands, turned them over. They looked the same, felt the same. but a sick feeling crept up from my stomach, like I was suddenly aware of being looked through instead of looking out. I got out of the car, closed the door, walked home. The car didn't follow. It didn't need to. I spent the rest of the day in silence. No music, no phone. I didn't turn on the TV, didn't check the curtains. Just sat on the floor and tried to remember things, specific things, memories from before this all started. I tried to recall the texture of my old school uniform, the smell of my mom's hair after she'd come home from her shift, the way it felt to hold hands with someone for the first time and not think about what your face was doing. And I could. They were there, which meant I was still me. Right? That night I slept. No dreams. Just a soft, cold feeling, like something had been taken from me gently, not ripped, just lifted, like a splinter removed from skin you didn't know had been pierced. I woke up feeling lighter. Not better, but lighter. And I knew somehow that it was over. Not because anyone told me. Not because the car vanished. Because I felt complete in a way that scared me more than anything else. I was no longer being watched. Because whatever had been watching me was now in me, or had become me, or maybe I'd become it. I don't know the language for this kind of thing. No one does. But I do know this. The silver Peugeot hasn't shown up since. The texts stopped. No more notes. No more sightings of someone in my dress. It's been 2 weeks. I go to work. I walk home. I sleep. It's all normal. Except for one thing. My reflection. Sometimes it doesn't feel delayed anymore. Sometimes it feels like I'm the one behind. Like the reflection is already moving before I do. Like it's checking to see if I'll catch up. And once, just once, I smiled at myself. And the mirror didn't smile back. When my aunt passed away, I was left with her old house in Vermont. I had not visited it since I was a kid, and walking back into it after so many years felt more like entering a stranger's place than a relative's. The air smelled stale, like damp wood and dust, and the whole house carried that weight of neglect, of time settling into the boards. I had taken a week off work to clean the place up, sort through what needed to be donated or thrown away, and maybe decide whether I would sell it or keep it. The house was 3 stories if you counted the attic, with narrow staircases and small windows that let in more shadow than light. I spent most of the first 2 days on the lower floors, going through her kitchen, her bedroom, and her endless collection of porcelain figurines. It was boring but comforting, the kind of mindless work where the only sound is the scrape of a broom or the rustle of cardboard boxes. It was on the 3rd afternoon, when I decided to tackle the attic, that things shifted. The attic stairs were hidden behind a narrow door at the end of the upstairs hallway. The door stuck at first, like it had swelled into the frame, and it took a hard shove with my shoulder to get it open. The smell hit me immediately, that dry old dust mixed with something faintly sour, like forgotten apples. The attic itself was larger than I remembered. Sloped ceiling, low beams I had to duck under, and piles of covered furniture huddled beneath stained sheets. The light bulb hanging from the center of the ceiling buzzed weakly when I pulled the string, giving just enough illumination to cast long shadows. It felt like stepping into a frozen time capsule, except everything was draped and muffled, as if someone wanted to hide the past away. That was when I saw it. Against the far wall, taller than me, was a mirror covered with a heavy cloth. It leaned slightly forward, as if it was too big to stand completely upright without toppling. For a moment I did not think much of it. People cover mirrors when they store them, to keep the glass from scratching or collecting dust, but something about it made me pause. The cloth was not the same dusty white as the other sheets. It was dark gray, thick, almost like canvas, and tied loosely around the mirror's frame with an old cord. I walked closer, brushing cobwebs from my face, and stood in front of it. The thing was enormous, the kind of mirror you would expect in a grand hallway or ballroom, not in a modest old house. The cloth clung to the shape of it like it had not been moved in decades. I hesitated before touching it. There was no real reason for me to feel nervous. It was just a mirror, after all, but I found myself standing there longer than I meant to, studying the outline beneath the cloth, as if I might see movement. My fingers brushed the edge, and the fabric felt damp, though the rest of the attic was bone dry. I tugged the cloth down slowly. Dust exploded into the air, and I coughed as it settled. Beneath was the mirror, its frame carved with intricate patterns of vines and leaves, though tarnished and chipped in places. The glass itself was surprisingly clear, not cracked, not cloudy like old mirrors tend to get. For a second I only saw myself, hair messy from cleaning, t-shirt streaked with dust, eyes tired. But the longer I stared, the heavier the silence became. The air in the attic pressed against my ears. The faint hum of the bulb seemed to dull. It felt like waiting for something. I shook my head, laughed quietly at myself, and draped the cloth back over the glass. The rest of the day passed uneventfully. I packed a few boxes, found some old yearbooks and letters, and dragged them downstairs. But all night, even while brushing my teeth or lying in bed, I kept picturing that mirror standing there in the attic, covered now, but present, too big to ignore. The next morning, with sunlight pouring through the kitchen windows, I told myself it was ridiculous to feel uneasy about furniture. I carried up a fresh sheet from the linen closet, cleaner than the damp cloth, and replaced the covering. This time, though, I let myself look a little longer at the glass. That was when I noticed it. The reflection was fine at first, but when I raised my hand to adjust my hair, I swear the mirrored version of me lagged, only for the briefest fraction of a second, like a video out of sync. I froze, staring. I tried again, waved my hand, turned my head. Each time, it followed, but just slightly behind, enough for me to notice, enough to twist something deep in my stomach. I told myself it was my imagination. Maybe the glass was warped. Maybe my eyes were tired. I laughed nervously in the empty attic, trying to force the unease away. But when I walked out of the attic and pulled the door shut behind me, I could not shake the image of my reflection moving after I already had. That night, lying in bed, I thought I heard faint noises above me. The attic creaked like old wood does, but this sounded different. It was subtle, irregular, like someone shifting their weight slowly, trying not to be heard. I told myself it was mice. It had to be mice. Still, I pulled the covers higher and shut my eyes tighter, listening to my own pulse echoing in my ears. The following day, I avoided the attic as long as I could. I busied myself with cleaning the downstairs rooms, hauling more trash bags to the car. But eventually I needed something I had left in one of the boxes up there. I climbed the stairs reluctantly, every step heavier than the last. When I opened the attic door, the air felt colder, sharper, like the temperature had dropped. The sheet I had draped over the mirror was shifted, sagging slightly to one side. I stood there staring at it for a long time, debating whether to fix it or just leave. My curiosity won out. I stepped closer and adjusted the fabric, and for a split second my eyes flicked to the glass. I was already standing straight. My arms were at my sides, but the reflection lingered, my own image still bent over, reaching for the cloth. even after I had already moved. It caught up a second later, snapping back into alignment with me. I stepped back, breath quick, heart hammering. The attic felt too quiet, too watchful. I left the mirror covered and hurried downstairs, convincing myself that I had seen wrong, that my mind was playing tricks after too many dusty hours in this place. But that night, I dreamed of the attic. The bulb buzzing, the sheet slipping, the reflection waiting, always just behind. And when I woke up in the dark, I could not shake the feeling that something upstairs was still awake, still watching, waiting for me to come back. The morning after that dream, I moved slower than usual. Coffee did little to chase away the heaviness in my chest. I kept telling myself it was just the weight of grief, the fatigue from cleaning, the strange loneliness of being in a house where someone had lived and died. But every time I walked down the upstairs hallway, my eyes caught on that attic door, and it felt like standing too close to a live wire. I avoided going up there for as long as I could. There was plenty of work left in the basement and on the lower floors. The house had been closed up for so long that every corner needed sweeping, every drawer needed sorting. I told myself the mirror could wait. It was just an old piece of furniture, strange only because I had let my imagination get the better of me. Still, by late afternoon, I found myself standing at the bottom of the narrow attic stairs, my hand on the banister. It felt childish to hesitate. I pushed the door open and climbed up quickly, determined to grab the box I needed and get out. The air was cooler again, just like before, but sharper now, like I had walked into a different season altogether. The sheet still hung over the mirror, though the edges looked uneven, as if it had shifted during the night. My skin prickled. I kept my eyes down, rummaging through the boxes stacked near the stairs until I found the one with old family records. As I lifted it, something made me glance sideways, and that was enough. I saw it clearly this time. The reflection was visible even through the draped fabric. The sheet should have blocked it entirely, but faintly, I could see myself standing there. Not identical. Delayed again. The outline was blurred, as if seen through water, but it was undeniably me. I dropped the box and staggered back. The thud echoed, and for a moment it was like the attic swallowed the sound whole. My reflection in that faint haze did not startle like I did. It simply stood still, arms loose at its sides, its head tilted slightly as if curious. I pulled the sheet tighter around the frame, hands shaking, and back toward the door. My mind ran in frantic circles, searching for some explanation, a trick of the light, my eyes adjusting wrong. Fatigue. But even as I told myself those things, I knew none of them explained why the reflection had not moved the same way I had. That night, I tried not to think about it. I buried myself in paperwork, sipping cheap wine until my body relaxed. I forced myself to sleep on the couch downstairs, telling myself I would deal with the attic another day. But around 2 a.m, I woke with a start. The sound was faint at first, but it grew clearer as I listened. Soft creaks, slow, deliberate, like someone shifting weight above me. My heart pounded. I stared at the ceiling, every muscle tense, certain that if I kept perfectly still it might stop. But the noise continued. Step, pause, step, then silence. So sudden it made the silence ring in my ears. I sat up, holding my breath. The house was black around me. My phone read 2:28. I told myself again it was just the house settling. Old wood did that. It was nothing more than that. But I could not shake the certainty that something had been moving up there, careful and slow, listening for me. The next day, I made a decision. I would move the mirror out of the house altogether. Whatever weird energy it carried, I wanted it gone. I found a pair of old gloves in the garage and went upstairs. My plan was simple. Cover the mirror again, drag it carefully to the hallway, and somehow wrestle it into the back of my car. I could dump it at the donation center, let it become someone else's problem. When I entered the attic, though, I froze. The sheet was gone. It lay crumpled on the floor beside the mirror, as if tossed aside. The glass gleamed in the dim light, waiting. I should have turned and left right then, but I stepped closer. My breath fogged faintly in the air. I stood before the mirror, gloves on, ready to grip the frame. But then I saw myself in it, and saw the delay again. I lifted my hand to touch the glass, but the reflection was slower, hesitating, then catching up. When I let my hand fall, it kept its hand raised for a moment too long, palm pressed against the inside of the glass. That was when I realized I could see the lines of its face more clearly. Not just me, not exactly. The features were mine, yes, but off in subtle ways. My jaw a little sharper, my eyes slightly darker, and when its lips twitched into the faintest curve of a smile, mine did not. I stumbled back, heart hammering. The box I had left on the floor was still there. I grabbed it, almost tripping over the sheet, and fled down the stairs. I slammed the attic door shut behind me, chest heaving. The rest of the day I spent outside, cleaning the overgrown yard, anything to keep from going back inside. The sun felt good, grounding. I told myself that maybe I would call someone to help me move the mirror tomorrow. Maybe I would even pay someone to haul it off. But when night came, I could not bring myself to fall asleep. I left all the lights on. The house hummed faintly, alive with electricity, but I still heard it. Around 3 in the morning, the ceiling creaked again. Step, pause, step. I gripped the blanket tight, staring up, certain that whatever stood in front of that mirror was no longer waiting for me to come to it. I forced myself through the next morning, bleary-eyed, half alive on coffee. I avoided the attic entirely, but as I sat at the kitchen table, sorting through papers, I felt the oddest sensation, like eyes pressing into the back of my skull. I turned, quickly, but the kitchen was empty. The sensation lingered. It was not paranoia. It was awareness. That evening, I caught myself glancing at the attic door again and again. I knew I would have to open it eventually. And worse, I knew the reflection would be waiting, watching. By the time night fell, I sat in the living room, wide awake, listening for the creaks above. I thought I saw movement in the hallway shadows once or twice, but each time I convinced myself it was just exhaustion. Still, I could not shake the certainty growing in me. The reflection was not just a quirk of glass. It was something else, and it had learned to look like me. And maybe, just maybe, it was practicing. The third night I stayed in that house was the one where I stopped pretending this was all in my head. Until then, I had managed to rationalize the strangeness. The cold air, the creaking above my bed, the delayed reflection. All of it could be blamed on stress, fatigue, even faulty old glass. But that night something happened that left no room for comforting explanations. I was in the upstairs bathroom brushing my teeth, staring at myself in the mirror over the sink. It was small, square, and mounted crookedly above the faucet. I had always hated brushing in silence, so I hummed under my breath, nothing particular, just noise to break the quiet. As I leaned down to spit into the sink, I caught something in the corner of my eye. My reflection did not move. I froze. My real body straightened, toothbrush still in hand, foam gathering at the corners of my mouth. The reflection stayed bent over, unmoving, the toothbrush still hovering near its lips. Then, slowly, it lifted its head. My stomach dropped. The reflection was not smiling, but its eyes seemed darker, as if the pupils had spread wide, drowning out the color. I staggered back and dropped the toothbrush into the sink. My reflection did not follow the motion. It only blinked once, deliberately, then caught up all at once, as if the scene had fast-forwarded to match me. I slammed the bathroom light off and fled to the hallway. I told myself it was just exhaustion playing tricks, but I could still see the delayed face burned into my mind. And I realized something important in that moment. The bathroom mirror was not the problem. It had never been. The thing in the attic was bleeding into every reflective surface in the house. Sleep was out of the question after that. I sat up in bed with a lamp on, trying to distract myself with paperwork. But at some point the lamp flickered and went dark, and I was left in near total shadow. My skin went clammy. I fumbled with the switch until the bulb buzzed back on. For just a moment, in the black glass of the window, I saw something that should not have been there. It was me, but not. Standing just a little too close to the bed, its mouth twisted into that faint curve of a smile, the one that never reached the eyes. I did not sleep. By morning, I felt half hollow, running on stale coffee and adrenaline. Every time I glanced into a surface, even the sheen of the toaster or the faint reflection on the television screen, I thought I caught it. A delayed movement, a darker eye, the flicker of a smile. I knew I had to do something. I could not live like this. I gathered the courage to go back into the attic that afternoon. The sunlight should have made it easier, but it only revealed how wrong the room had become. The mirror stood uncovered, leaning slightly against the wall like it had been shifted closer to the center of the attic. The sheet lay even farther away, shoved into a corner. I approached slowly, gloves back on, heart pounding in my ears. I told myself I would drag it downstairs and smash it in the driveway, break it into 100 pieces, end this once and for all. But as I stepped in front of it, I froze. The reflection was not matching me anymore, not even pretending. It stood upright with its hands folded neatly in front of it while I hunched over like a nervous wreck. Its face was calm, composed, almost serene, and then, as I stared, it tilted its head in that slow, curious way. I tilted mine too, testing. The reflection did not move. For the first time, I felt the sharp clarity of being observed, not just mirrored, watched. I lunged forward, yanking the sheet up from the floor and trying to fling it over the glass. But before the fabric landed, the reflection leaned closer, pressing its palm to the inside of the mirror. My breath fogged against the glass as the sheet slid over and cut off the view. I stumbled back, the sheet shuddering slightly, as if something had pressed against it from the inside. Then, stillness. Only my ragged breathing filled the attic. I wanted to run, but my legs refused. My body felt rooted. I forced myself down the stairs, each step echoing like a gunshot, and slammed the attic door behind me. That night, I did not go near the bathroom mirror or the dark window panes. I sat in the living room with every light on and tried to convince myself I was safe. But at 2:43 in the morning, I heard it, a sound I had never heard before. Glass tapping, light, deliberate, rhythmic. It came from above, from the attic. I held my breath. It continued, tap, 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 like fingernails against glass. Then it stopped, and I heard something worse. A laugh, not loud, just a soft, rasping chuckle that sounded like it came from a throat too dry to manage sound. My stomach turned to ice. I did not go upstairs. I sat frozen until the first faint light of dawn crept through the curtains. Only then did the air in the house seem to loosen. Only then did I move. By morning I thought I might have hallucinated it. Lack of sleep, too much stress. But when I forced myself upstairs, I found proof I could not deny. The sheet was gone, the mirror stood uncovered again, and etched into the glass were 3 faint scratches, just at eye level, as if something inside had dragged its nails down the surface. I stood staring for a long time, my chest rising and falling like I had run a mile, and as I stared I realized the scratches were not random. They looked like letters, rough, jagged, but deliberate. They spelled out one word, mine. The scratches stayed with me all day. I could not concentrate on anything else. It felt like the word had been carved directly into my mind, etched across every thought, pressing itself into me the way it was pressed into that glass. Mine. Not a warning. A claim. I told myself I should just get rid of it. Drive to the dump, smash the mirror into pieces, and bury the shards where no one would ever find them. I even went so far as to gather supplies, gloves, a hammer, a blanket to wrap the glass in. But when I carried the hammer up the stairs, something strange happened. The closer I got to the attic door, the heavier it felt in my hand. By the time I was standing at the top step, my arm ached with the weight. It made no sense. It was an ordinary hammer, yet I could barely keep my grip. I dropped it and it clanged against the wood. The sound was too loud, like the attic itself wanted to echo it, to remind me how small I was inside this house. I picked it up again and forced myself inside. The mirror stood waiting, uncovered as always, leaning there with the faint scratches catching the dim afternoon light. The word gleamed back at me in jagged lines. Mine. I lifted the hammer. My reflection stared, and then it smiled. Not a wide grin, not cartoonish or exaggerated, just that slight upward curve at the corner of the mouth. It was enough to make my insides twist. I froze with the hammer halfway raised. My reflection should have been shaking the way I was, hands trembling from adrenaline, but it looked calm, steady, almost patient. I tried to bring the hammer down, but my arm would not move. My whole body felt locked, as though the reflection had reached through the glass and gripped me by the bones. The harder I tried to swing, the more impossible it became. Finally, I dropped the hammer, breathing hard, sweat dripping down my neck. The mirror looked almost smug. I backed out of the attic and slammed the door again. My chest heaved, heart pounding against my ribs, but I felt no relief. I knew now that smashing it would not be simple. It would not let me. That night, I avoided every reflective surface. I kept my eyes on the floor as I brushed my teeth, used my phone screen turned away from me, covered the television with a blanket. It did not help. The mirror did not need glass anymore. Sometime around midnight, I heard footsteps. Not in the attic this time. In the hallway. Slow, measured, deliberate. The floorboards creaked with each step, and then fell silent outside my bedroom door. I stared at the door until my eyes watered. The knob did not move. The door did not rattle, but I could feel it. Something was standing there on the other side, waiting. At some point, exhaustion dragged me under despite the terror, but the dreams were worse. I dreamed of the mirror, endless and towering, its surface rippling like black water, hands pressed against it from the inside, hundreds of them, palms smearing across the glass. Then one face pushed forward among them. My face, but wrong. The eyes too dark, the smile too steady. It whispered the word again. Mine. I woke gasping, drenched in sweat. The house was silent except for the faint ticking of the hallway clock. But when I glanced at the closet door, I saw it was open an inch wider than it had been when I went to bed. The next morning, I found more scratches. This time, not on the mirror. They were on the attic door itself. 4 vertical grooves down the wood, deep and splintered, as though something had tried to claw its way through. I knew then that it was not trapped anymore. The glass was not a prison. It had been a doorway, and I had opened it the moment I uncovered it. I left the house for most of the day, wandering coffee shops, sitting in the library, even driving aimlessly just to avoid being inside those walls. But everywhere I went, I caught glimpses. In the reflection of a shop window, in the glossy hood of a parked car, in the shimmer of water in a fountain. Always the same figure. Me, but not me. Waiting. When I returned home that evening, the house felt heavier than ever. The air pressed down, stale and damp, carrying a faint metallic tang that made me think of blood. The attic door stood closed, but I could hear faint scratching again from above, like fingernails dragging against glass. I did not go upstairs. I stayed in the living room, every light blazing, the television on for noise, though I barely paid attention to it. I could not shake the feeling that the house itself was shrinking around me, closing in. Around midnight, the television screen flickered. For an instant, I saw it. Not the program I had been half watching, but a reflection. My living room, as if seen from inside the mirror. And standing behind me in that reflection was my double, its head tilted, smiling faintly. I spun around. Nothing was there. When I looked back at the screen, the normal program had returned. but my stomach had already turned to stone. It had stepped out. Sleep was impossible. I sat awake until the gray light of dawn filtered through the curtains, clutching the remote like it could protect me. My whole body ached with tension. By morning, I decided I could not stay here anymore. I packed a small bag, stuffing in clothes, toiletries, whatever I could grab. I would get a motel, at least for a few nights, clear my head, figure out what to do. But when I went to grab my car keys from the hook by the door, they were gone. The hook was empty. I searched everywhere, kitchen counters, jacket pockets, the floor, nothing. Finally, I looked up. They were hanging from the attic door handle. I stood frozen, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Slowly, I stepped closer. The keys dangled neatly from the knob, swaying slightly though there was no draft. Above them, faint smears streaked the wood, fingerprints, too large to be mine. I could not bring myself to touch the handle. I backed away, every hair on my body standing on end. That night, I stayed in the living room again. I barely moved. The scratching from the attic grew louder, more insistent, until it sounded like something pounding its fists against the glass. And then, in a moment of silence so deep I could hear the blood in my ears, I heard the floorboards above me groan. It was not inside the mirror anymore. It was moving across the attic floor. I sat rigid, gripping the edge of the couch, staring at the ceiling. Every creak came closer to the spot directly above me. And then it stopped. The house was silent, too silent. And then, very softly, I heard it. A whisper, my own voice, coming from the ceiling, but stretched and dry and wrong. It said the same word, mine. The attic ceiling groaned above me for what felt like hours, but time had lost its shape. I sat on the couch, rigid and breathless, staring upward at the boards that separated me from whatever waited on the other side. The whisper still echoed in my head, not fading like an ordinary sound, but sinking deeper, embedding itself until I could not tell if I was remembering it or if it was still happening. I wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at me to throw the door open, sprint into the street, and never look back. But my legs would not move. My body felt like it belonged to someone else now, like I was just a passenger watching from behind my own eyes. The thought hit me hard. What if that was exactly what it wanted? Sometime after dawn, I must have passed out from sheer exhaustion. When I opened my eyes, light leaked through the curtains, but the house did not feel safe. It was worse. The air was thick, heavy, like it had absorbed everything I had felt the night before and was now feeding it back to me. My mouth was dry, my throat raw, but I did not move. I could not bring myself to go upstairs. When I finally stood, I walked through the house with deliberate steps, careful not to glance at any reflective surface. Even the toaster seemed threatening. I grabbed my phone, ready to call someone, anyone, but the screen froze before I could dial. The wallpaper image was supposed to be a photo of a mountain view I had taken years ago. Now it was my own face staring back at me, not the face I knew, but the other one, the one in the mirror. The smile was faint, but unmistakable. I dropped the phone and it clattered across the floor. I told myself again that I had to leave. Motel, hotel, it did not matter. I only needed distance. The car keys still hung from the attic door handle, mocking me, daring me. I refused to touch them. Instead, I called a cab from the landline phone, forcing myself to keep my voice calm as I gave the address. The operator said a driver would be here in 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes stretched into eternity. I sat by the front window, eyes locked on the driveway, waiting for headlights or any sign of life. But the street remained empty. At exactly the 20-minute mark, the phone rang again. My stomach lurched when I saw it was the same number. I answered, my voice barely working. The operator's tone was neutral, professional. She said the driver had arrived, but no one was outside. She asked if I was sure I wanted to cancel. I stammered that I never saw a car. She paused for too long, then said quietly, almost too quietly to hear, that the driver swore he saw me standing in the driveway. I hung up without replying. The day passed in fragments. I locked myself in the living room, curtains drawn, lights on, television playing to fill the silence. Every so often, I thought I saw something move in the corner of my eye, a shift in the reflection of the screen, or a shimmer across the glass of a picture frame. I stopped looking altogether. By nightfall I was trembling with fatigue and hunger but could not bring myself to eat. My stomach clenched every time I tried. Around midnight the house seemed to exhale, a long sigh through the pipes and the walls, and the lights flickered. When they steadied again, I saw the attic door was open, only an inch, but open. The keys no longer hung from the knob. They lay on the floor at the bottom of the stairs. I froze, not daring to move. The silence pressed down, thick and unnatural, until it was broken by the sound of something dragging across the attic floor. Slow, deliberate. It grew closer until I could pinpoint it directly above the living room. Then it stopped. I wanted to believe it was all in my head. Sleep deprivation, paranoia, stress. But then a single object dropped from the attic, landing with a soft clink on the floor. It was a shard of glass. The mirror was breaking, not from my side, but from inside. I backed toward the front door, heart hammering so hard it hurt. My hand shook as I fumbled with the lock, but the door would not budge. No matter how I twisted or pulled, it stayed closed. The windows were the same, stuck fast as though the house itself had decided I was not leaving. Another shard fell, this one larger, glinting in the faint light. I forced myself to look up, and in that split second, I saw a face staring through the crack in the attic door. My face, but wrong. The eyes too dark, the smile too wide, skin pale as wax. I stumbled backward, tripping over the rug, hitting the floor hard. The pain barely registered. The attic door creaked open farther, and the sound of glass shattering filled the house like a storm. I crawled toward the kitchen, my only thought to arm myself, to grab a knife, anything. The air grew colder with every inch I moved, and the faint whisper followed me, repeating that same word over and over. Mine, mine, mine. I grabbed the largest knife I could find and pressed myself against the counter, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The house was alive with noise now, footsteps pounding above, glass raining down in bursts, the groan of wood under impossible weight, and then silence. I tightened my grip on the knife, straining to hear. Every muscle in my body screamed to move, but fear rooted me in place. From the living room came the faint sound of footsteps, not from above anymore, from the floor. Each step slow, deliberate, dragging, coming closer. The shadows stretched too far, bending toward the kitchen, as if eager to greet what walked with them. I forced myself to peek around the doorway, and my heart nearly stopped. It was me, standing there, knife in hand, expression twisted into that same steady smile. The reflection had stepped out. I blinked and it was gone. Just the empty living room, the shards of glass glittering across the carpet. But the knife was still heavy in my hand, and when I looked down, I realized the blade was smeared with something dark. I did not remember using it. The attic groaned again, louder than before. The house seemed to lean inward, pulling me toward it. My double had not just stepped out. It had stepped in, and the barrier between us was gone. I stumbled back, clutching the knife, unable to stop trembling. The mirror was no longer in the attic. It was everywhere now, in every surface that could catch a reflection, in every corner I dared not look at. I had opened the doorway, and there was no closing it. That night, I did not sleep. I could not. I sat in the kitchen until the sun rose, and even then, the light brought no relief. The shards glittered on the floor like teeth, and every one of them held a reflection that did not match mine. The first rays of morning spilled across the house, thin and weak through the dusty curtains. The air felt stale, as though it had been locked in place for centuries, waiting for me to breathe it in. I had not slept. I had not dared to. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the broken shards glittering on the floor, each one holding a face that was not mine. I had survived the night, but survival felt hollow. Something had already crossed the threshold. The knife still sat on the kitchen table where I had left it. I could not bring myself to touch it again. The smear of darkness on its blade had dried into a crusted stain, and the sight of it twisted my stomach. I could not remember how it got there. That was the worst part. I could not trust my own memory anymore. The attic was silent now, but that silence felt heavier than the noises had, a waiting silence. I could feel the weight of the house pressing inward, the way a person holds their breath before speaking. Every creak of the floor beneath my feet sounded deliberate, as though it belonged to someone else. I told myself it was over, that breaking the mirror had somehow freed me, but I knew better. The mirror had not been a cage, it had been a door, and now that it was shattered, there was no barrier at all. I forced myself to act. Fear had kept me frozen too long, and if I stayed in this house another night, I would not come out alive. I gathered what little strength I had left and began to clean the shards. I wore gloves, careful not to look directly into any piece, dropping them into a heavy garbage bag one by one. Each shard gave off a faint chill, as though it still held a breath of something that did not belong in this world. When the bag was full, I tied it tightly and carried it outside. The weight felt unnatural for so little glass. My arms ached under it, and the plastic bulged as though something inside was pressing outward. I did not stop to think. I loaded it into the trunk of my car and drove. I did not know where I was going, only that I needed distance between me and that house. The road wound through endless stretches of pine and desert brush, the sky widening overhead, but the farther I drove, the heavier the trunk seemed to feel. A low thud rattled through the car as though the bag had shifted on its own. My breath quickened, but I did not stop. After an hour of driving, I reached a quarry on the edge of town, a place where the earth gaped open like a wound. It was deserted, silent but for the wind echoing across stone. I parked near the edge and wrestled the bag out of the trunk. It squirmed in my hands, or maybe I imagined it, but the movement made bile rise in my throat. Without giving myself time to reconsider, I heaved the bag into the abyss. It fell for a long moment, then shattered against the rocks below, the sound sharp and final. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of relief. The pieces were gone. The door was gone. I could leave this nightmare behind. I drove home in silence, the empty trunk a strange comfort. The house loomed in the distance, but its shadow did not terrify me the way it had before. It looked smaller now, weaker, like a place that had lost its teeth. When I stepped inside, the air felt lighter, though the silence still clung to the walls. I told myself it was just a house again. That night, I slept for the first time. The dreams came, restless and cold, but they were only dreams. When I woke, sunlight filled the room, and nothing moved in the shadows. For 3 days I dared to hope. I went about my life, cautious but freer. I even laughed once, though the sound felt strange leaving my throat. On the 4th day, I received a package. No return address, no postmark, just a small box sitting on my doorstep. My hands shook as I carried it inside. I wanted to throw it away, to burn it unopened, but some part of me already knew. Inside was a single shard of glass, smooth, gleaming, impossibly cold to the touch, and in its surface I saw not my own reflection but hers, the other me, the one with the pale skin and the black eyes and the smile that stretched too wide. She lifted her hand and pressed it against the glass, and before I realized what I was doing, I pressed mine against it too. The glass was not just cold, it was soft, pliable, as though it wanted me to step through, and for the first time since it began, I understood. I had not brought something out of the mirror. It had been calling me in all along. I dropped the shard, heart hammering. But the image did not vanish. The reflection remained, standing there, smiling, waiting. Her lips moved soundlessly, forming words I already knew. Let me out. I took the shard and wrapped it in cloth, hiding it deep in the farthest corner of the attic. I nailed the hatch shut, sealed it as best I could. The house is quiet now, but I know the truth. The mirror was never just glass. It was a contract, and I signed it the moment I uncovered it. The ending is not triumph, it is understanding. I will carry this reflection with me until the day it decides to cross again. The difference is that now I know what it wants, and knowing is a kind of power. For now, the attic is sealed, and the house is silent. The reflection waits, but it does not have me yet. I walk through the rooms in daylight, breathing easier, reminding myself that sometimes the only way to win is to keep living, to keep denying the pull. The other me can wait forever if it has to. Because this is my life, my body, my face. And no matter how many smiles it carves into the glass, it will never be mine. My name's Caitlin, and what I'm about to share still doesn't make sense to me. It's the kind of thing you read online and dismiss as paranoia, or a trick of an overactive imagination. I would have thought the same thing too, honestly. But this isn't a ghost story, not exactly, or even something I can easily explain away as anxiety or stress. I'm writing it down because I need it to exist outside my head, because maybe, if I get it out clearly enough, I'll finally understand what happened in that apartment. I moved into the top floor unit of a small, slightly run-down apartment building on the edge of town. It was cheap, decent enough, and quite everything I was looking for after a messy breakup and a year spent sleeping on friends' couches. The landlord, Mr. Hartley, was an older guy, gruff, but friendly enough, the kind who mumbled to himself while fixing things and kept his glasses on a string around his neck. He handed me the keys with a distracted smile, told me the unit was all mine, and warned me the hallway lights flickered sometimes. The wiring's old, he shrugged, but it's quiet up here. No one else on your floor. I liked the sound of that. After months of couch surfing, the idea of a quiet, private space was exactly what I needed. It wasn't anything special, a small living room, kitchenette, bedroom, bathroom, and a closet barely big enough for my clothes, but it was mine. I unpacked that afternoon, boxes stacked around me, music playing quietly on my phone. I felt comfortable there at first, but that first night, something changed. I woke around 3 a.m, disoriented, listening to someone moving quietly behind the wall, the one my bedroom shared with the neighboring apartment. At first, I thought it might be pipes, old buildings creaking, the usual noises you rationalize when you're half asleep. But the longer I listened, the clearer it became. Footsteps, soft pacing, deliberate and rhythmic, like someone walking slowly from one side of the room to the other, then pausing, then pacing again. My chest tightened slightly. It wasn't frightening exactly, just unsettling. Mr. Hartley had specifically told me no one else lived up here, but maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe he'd meant no one else on my side of the hall. That had to be it. I tried to ignore it, to drift back into sleep, but the pacing continued, soft and persistent, mixed with something else now, a quiet, gentle humming. A woman's voice, faint and melodic, like a lullaby, hummed absently to pass the time. It wasn't unpleasant, but something about it felt wrong, out of place, too careful, too deliberate. By morning, it seemed like a bad dream. The daylight made the whole thing seem foolish, overblown, and I laughed at myself as I made coffee, shaking off the lingering feeling of unease. But the question stayed with me, nagging gently at the back of my mind. Who was in that apartment? Later, when I ran into Mr. Hartley in the hall, toolbox in hand, I asked casually, "Hey, do I have a neighbor up here?" He glanced at me, eyebrows raised slightly. "Neighbor?" "The unit next to mine," I clarified, pointing down the hall. "Thought you said no one lived there, but I heard someone last night, moving around, humming, just wondering who it was." He stared at me a moment longer, then shook his head. "You must have heard wrong. Nobody lives there." I frowned slightly. "Are you sure? I definitely heard something." "Apartment sealed," he interrupted firmly. "Has been ever since the fire 5 years ago. Nobody's been in there since then. Walls are thin, that's all." I stood there, suddenly uncomfortable, unsure what to say next. Mr. Hartley seemed to notice my unease, his expression softening slightly. "Just old noises, Caitlin. Nothing to worry about, I promise." He walked away without another word, leaving me standing awkwardly in the hallway, feeling somehow foolish and unsettled at the same time. Later, when I passed by the unit, I paused, staring at the closed door. It looked ordinary, same faded paint, same brass numbers, but something about it now felt different, heavier. I reached out slowly, pressing my palm flat against the wood. It was warm, warmer than it should have been. Not hot exactly, but noticeably warm to the touch, as if something behind it was radiating heat. I stepped back quickly, pulse quickening. Mr. Hartley had said nobody was inside, that it was sealed. But I'd heard something. I knew I had. That night, sleep was difficult. Every time I began drifting off, my ears strained automatically for sounds from the neighboring apartment. But this time it was silent, completely silent. Until, just after midnight, I heard it. A scratching noise, soft but unmistakable, coming from behind the shared wall. Slow, deliberate scrapes, as if fingernails were gently dragging across the drywall, testing the barrier. I sat up, heart hammering, every muscle tense. The scratching continued, slow and steady, moving gradually along the wall, as if tracing a careful path. Then abruptly, it stopped. I held my breath, waiting, hoping it was over. Then came the knock. Just one gentle, deliberate, soft enough to have been imagined if I hadn't been listening so closely, but I heard it clearly. One single, careful tap. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I sat rigidly, staring at the wall, waiting for something else, anything else. Nothing came. Eventually, exhaustion pulled me into sleep. But the next night, it happened again. The scratching, slow and careful, followed by 3 soft knocks, evenly spaced, patient and deliberate. And then, just as I was about to convince myself it was my imagination, I heard it clearly, a voice, quiet and muffled, coming from the vent beside my bed. A whisper, soft and tentative, barely audible through the metal grate. "Is it safe to come out yet?" My breath caught painfully. Every instinct in me screamed not to reply, not to acknowledge whatever was happening. I stayed silent, frozen, heart racing in my chest, listening carefully for anything else. But nothing more happened that night. No scratching, no pacing, no humming. In the morning, everything felt normal again. The apartment was quiet, ordinary, bathed in sunlight. I could almost convince myself I'd dreamed it all. Until the knocking began again, this time from inside my closet door. The knocking from inside my closet wasn't loud. It was gentle, hesitant, as if whoever or whatever was behind the door didn't want to startle me, but it did. My heart slammed so hard against my chest it actually hurt, and for a long moment, all I could do was stare at the closet door, waiting for it to happen again. But the knocking stopped almost as suddenly as it started, leaving the apartment heavy with a silence that felt louder than the sound itself. I couldn't move at first, could barely breathe. It was as if something had shifted, broken some unspoken boundary. The noises through the wall were one thing I could rationalize them, dismiss them as pipes or mice or even dreams. But this was different. This was in my space, closer than ever, impossible to deny or ignore. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, I stood carefully, never taking my eyes off the closet. My legs felt weak, unsteady beneath me. I took a slow step forward, then another, my hand reaching out toward the handle, but before I could touch it, I stopped, every muscle tensed, every nerve ending alive, screaming at me to reconsider. I stepped back quickly, retreating to the living room, grabbing my phone as I sat heavily on the couch. My hands shook as I scrolled through my contacts, desperate for someone to call, someone who might listen and help me make sense of this. But every name I landed on felt wrong. Friends who'd worry I was losing it, family who'd tell me to leave immediately, or worse, brush it off as paranoia. Finally, I called Mr. Hartley. I didn't know what else to do. He answered after 3 rings, sounding tired and slightly annoyed. "Caitlin, is everything okay?" I took a breath, struggling to steady my voice. Something's wrong with the apartment. There was a pause on his end, a shift in tone. What kind of something? "The noises I mentioned yesterday. They're worse, and now they're inside my closet." Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, strained. "That's not possible, Caitlin. It's an old building. Sounds carry strangely sometimes. I told you, no one else is up there." "Can you please just come up and check?" I begged, feeling tears sting behind my eyes. "I swear I'm not imagining this." He sighed heavily, reluctantly. "Give me a minute." I waited anxiously by the door until I heard him climb the stairs, each slow footstep creaking gently beneath his weight. When he finally knocked, I practically yanked the door open, heart still racing painfully. He stepped inside slowly, glancing around, looking slightly uncomfortable. "Show me." I led him directly to the bedroom, pointing at the closet door, still tightly shut. "In there." He approached cautiously, placing his hand lightly on the wood. He paused, listening intently, his face unreadable. Then he opened it quickly, stepping back just enough to reveal nothing. Just clothes, shoes, a suitcase pushed back into a corner, exactly what should have been there, nothing out of place. He looked at me carefully, his expression sympathetic but guarded. "Caitlin," he said gently, "maybe you just heard something from downstairs. The vents and pipes carry sound. It happens. No, I whispered, frustration bubbling up sharply. It was clear, deliberate knocking, Mr. Hartley. I'm not imagining this. He hesitated, clearly weighing his words. The apartment next door hasn't been touched in 5 years. After the fire, they boarded it up tight, cut the utilities. No one's inside. No one can get inside. I promise you that. But why? I don't know, he interrupted softly, firmly. But it's not what you think. Maybe it's time to talk to someone. You know, someone who can help. I stared at him, anger and humiliation mingling painfully inside me. He thought I was losing it. Maybe I was starting to wonder myself, but it didn't make the fear any less real. He left quietly after that, promising to check the unit again to ease my mind, but his voice was gentle and placating the way you speak to someone fragile or disturbed. I shut the door behind him, leaning against it, breathing shallowly, feeling completely alone. The rest of the day, I stayed away from the bedroom, moving restlessly around the living room, the kitchen, forcing myself not to glance at that closet door. I distracted myself with cleaning, television, cooking, but it was all meaningless, busy work to pass time. As night approached, anxiety coiled tighter and tighter inside me. Eventually, I couldn't avoid it any longer. I stepped back into the bedroom, trying to convince myself nothing was wrong, that it had been my imagination, or the pipes, or something harmless. But as soon as I closed the bedroom door behind me, the air felt heavier, charged somehow. I changed quickly, avoiding even a glance at the closet. I climbed into bed, pulling the covers tightly around me, willing sleep to come quickly and mercifully. It didn't. I lay there, tense, listening carefully, every sound magnified. At first, nothing happened, just the familiar hum of distant traffic, the creak of old wood, the whispering quiet of an empty apartment. Then, at precisely 2:13 a.m., the scratching started again, this time sharper, closer, louder. My chest tightened painfully as I sat up slowly, staring wide-eyed at the closet door. The scratching was rhythmic now, deliberate, moving up and down slowly, like nails tracing patterns along the inside. My pulse quickened sharply. I forced myself out of bed, walking slowly, deliberately, toward the closet. Each step felt impossibly heavy, as if my legs resisted instinctively, begging me to run instead. But I reached the door, hand trembling violently as I touched the handle. The scratching stopped immediately. My breath caught painfully. Slowly, carefully, I turned the handle and opened the door. Inside, the closet looked exactly the same. Nothing moved, nothing out of place. My clothes hung neatly, my shoes sat quietly, everything normal. Except for one small thing. On the back wall, barely noticeable, were faint scratch marks, thin, deep grooves etched deliberately into the paint. They spelled something clearly, though shakily, as if carved by desperate fingers. Please let me out. I stumbled back, heart pounding, breath catching painfully in my throat. My mind raced wildly, desperately trying to rationalize what I saw, but there was no rational explanation, nothing that could make sense of this. I shut the door quickly, pressing my back against it, breathing raggedly, trying not to panic. But even as I stood there, frozen and terrified, I heard it again, a soft whisper, barely audible, coming clearly through the vent above me. The same voice as before, trembling slightly with desperation. Please, I don't want to be alone anymore. I didn't sleep at all that night. How could I, knowing what was happening behind the walls of my own apartment? I sat up in bed, the light on, eyes fixed firmly on the closet door, half expecting it to slowly creak open or for the whisper to return. But it stayed quiet after that plea, silent enough to almost make me doubt myself again. Almost. By the time dawn broke, pale and hesitant, I felt drained, my nerves raw and jittery. I couldn't face another day trapped here alone, spiraling into panic. I got dressed quickly, barely glancing at my reflection, dark circles, hollow eyes, and left without eating, needing air and space to clear my head. I spent hours wandering aimlessly around town, stopping in coffee shops I'd never visited before, sitting at bus stops I had no intention of using, anything to delay returning home. But no matter how far I walked or how long I lingered, the apartment lingered with me, its walls, its whispers, the scratching behind my closet door. Eventually, exhausted and out of options, I found myself back at the building entrance, staring reluctantly up at the top floor windows. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavy and reluctant. When I reached the top floor, Mr. Hartley was already standing there, toolbox in hand, waiting patiently outside my door. "Caitlin," he said gently, almost apologetic, "can we talk?" I hesitated, then nodded wearily, opening my apartment door and stepping aside to let him in. He walked past me slowly, his eyes carefully scanning the room before turning back to face me. "I'm not saying you're crazy," he began quietly, hands raised slightly, palms open, cautious. "But I checked everything again this morning. I even went into the unit next door. I broke the seal, opened it up." My eyes widened. "You did?" He nodded slowly. "I had to know for sure. I didn't want you feeling unsafe here. But Caitlin, there's nobody in there. Nothing but empty rooms and old fire damage." "But the scratching." "I don't know," he said softly, cutting me off gently. "Maybe mice, maybe old pipes, maybe echoes. This place has history, you know. Sounds get stuck. Memories, too." I stared at him helplessly, feeling the tightness in my chest worsen. "You saw the scratches in my closet I showed you." He looked down, clearly uncomfortable. "I saw them, yeah, but I don't know when they got there. Could have been from before you moved in. Could have been you in your sleep. Stress does strange things." "I'm not imagining this," I whispered, frustrated tears welling sharply. "I believe you feel something is happening," he replied carefully, choosing his words. "But there's nothing physically here, not that I could find. Maybe it's time you thought about finding somewhere else to stay." I felt a sudden rush of anger and embarrassment, shame burning hot in my cheeks. "You want me to move out? Just like that?" "I'm just suggesting it might help," he said quietly. "I don't want to see you scared like this." After he left, I felt completely hollow. Every reassurance he'd given felt fake, meaningless. I knew what I'd heard. I knew what I'd seen. I wasn't making this up, wasn't inventing something to fill the emptiness in my life. But his doubt shook me anyway. That evening, I sat alone in the quiet apartment, listening carefully. nerves stretched thin, waiting for the noises to return. As darkness settled in, my anxiety built painfully, my ears straining to hear anything: footsteps, whispers, scratches, but the apartment was silent, almost defiantly so. Eventually, I couldn't stand it anymore. I stood quickly, grabbing my coat and keys, desperate for some kind of answer or resolution. I stepped into the hallway, eyes fixed on the neighboring apartment door, the one Mr. Hartley had reopened and supposedly cleared. It stood slightly ajar now, inviting me closer. My heartbeat quickened as I approached slowly, pushing the door open fully, stepping hesitantly inside. The apartment was dark, musty, the air heavy with years of stale emptiness and the faint charred scent of long extinguished fire. Even in the dark, I could see the damage clearly: walls stained with smoke, paint blistered and peeling, furniture blackened and warped. But Mr. Hartley was right. There was no one here. No hidden occupant, no mysterious tenant pacing the floorboards at night. Just an empty, burned-out space, quiet and abandoned. Still, as I stood there, a shiver ran down my spine. The apartment felt wrong somehow, not just damaged, but deeply, unsettlingly empty, as if something important had been erased. It wasn't just old fire damage, I realized slowly. The entire place felt drained, stripped clean of life. I turned quickly, anxious to leave, but stopped abruptly as something caught my eye near the wall that separated this apartment from my bedroom. There, clearly visible even in the gloom, were markings scratched deeply into the charred drywall. I stepped closer, my chest tightening painfully. Scratched into the wall were tally marks, dozens of them, carefully drawn in shaky lines one after another, each set of 5 slashed through with a sharp diagonal mark, counting something. Counting days, weeks, months. I reached out slowly, fingers brushing the rough edges, my throat tightening painfully. Who had been here, hidden away, counting desperately, waiting for rescue, waiting for release? Then, beneath the tally marks, I noticed a second set of scratches, words carved roughly but clearly into the drywall. They left me behind. My breath caught painfully. I stepped back quickly, heart racing, head spinning. This wasn't something I could rationalize. Someone had been here, trapped, hidden away, abandoned. And whatever happened in this apartment hadn't been resolved by fire or time. It was still here, waiting quietly, desperately reaching out to anyone who might finally hear. I fled back to my apartment, slamming the door shut, leaning against it, breathing raggedly, fighting panic. The emptiness, the silence, it made sense now. Someone had been sealed away, forgotten, buried beneath explanations and reassurances that never quite felt right. And now they were reaching out to me, because I was the only one who could hear. I stumbled into my bedroom, eyes drawn irresistibly to the closet. Without thinking, almost in a daze, I opened the door, staring again at the scratches pleading for release. They matched exactly, perfectly, the ones I'd just seen next door. I closed the closet slowly, carefully, knowing with absolute certainty I was no longer alone. That night, when the whispers returned through the vent, faint and desperate, I didn't pull away or cover my ears. Instead, heart pounding, I whispered back, gently, cautiously, "I can hear you. Who are you?" There was silence for a long moment, heavy and expectant. Then quietly, shakingly, the voice replied, "I don't remember anymore. They took my name when they left me here." My throat tightened painfully. "Who's they?" The voice hesitated, then answered softly, fearfully, "The ones who started the fire." As I sat there, heart hammering, cold realization washed over me. The fire hadn't been accidental. It had been deliberate, meant to hide something or someone. And now, 5 years later, that someone was reaching out, desperately pleading to finally be remembered. And they had chosen me to listen. I sat there in the dark, staring at the wall vent, trying to process the quiet words that had drifted through from the other side. My heartbeat was fast, uneven, and my mind raced as I struggled to understand the reality I had somehow stumbled into. It felt impossible, yet undeniably real. A fire that had sealed off an apartment, a person trapped inside, abandoned, hidden away, their existence carefully forgotten, someone who didn't even remember their own name anymore. I swallowed hard, leaning closer to the vent, voice trembling slightly. "Why did they leave you here?" For a long moment, silence. Then carefully, softly, the voice came again, hesitant, as though the words were difficult to form. "Because I saw them." "Saw who?" I asked quietly, breath caught in my throat. Another pause, heavier this time. "The ones who burned it." My mind spun, heart racing. "They locked you in because you saw them start the fire." "Yes," came the whispered reply, quiet but steady. "They wanted everyone gone, but I hid. They didn't know I was still here until after. By then, it was easier just to leave me." My chest felt tight, painful. The implications were staggering, impossible. Someone had deliberately set the fire. Someone had intentionally abandoned a witness, trapped and forgotten for 5 whole years. And Mr. Hartley, had he known, had he lied? I took a shaking breath. "Are you hurt? How have you survived?" "I'm not sure," came the soft, uncertain reply. "Time doesn't mean much now. I just wait. I've tried to leave, but the door won't open. I don't know how long it's been, only that it's felt very long." My mind struggled to grasp it. How could someone survive sealed in an empty apartment, cut off from food, water, sunlight, everything? How was it possible? "Can I help you?" I finally whispered, voice unsteady. Silence, then very softly, almost fearfully, "I think it's too late for that." I sat back slowly, feeling numb, helpless. "What do you mean?" "Sometimes I don't feel real anymore," came the quiet, drifting reply. "Sometimes I'm afraid I'm just part of the walls now, part of this place." "You're real," I whispered desperately. "I hear you, you're real." "Please don't stop believing that," the voice begged softly. "They told me I'd be forgotten. They said nobody would ever find me. If you hear me, if you believe me, maybe I can still be real." My chest ached painfully. "I believe you. I'll help you somehow." "Be careful," the voice said softly, urgently. "They'll come back if they think someone knows." "Who?" I whispered desperately. "Who will come back?" But no answer came, just silence again, heavier and deeper than before. I spent the rest of that night pacing, restless, frantic, trying to piece together what little I knew. When dawn finally arrived, I'd made my decision. I needed to know the truth. No more half answers, no more whispered warnings. It was time to confront the only person who could possibly know what had really happened. I waited in the hallway until Mr. Hartley showed up, tools in hand, on his usual morning rounds. He stiffened slightly when he saw me standing there, eyes cautious, wary. "Caitlin," he said slowly, carefully, "everything okay?" "No," I replied firmly, my voice steadier than I'd expected. "Not even close. I know someone was left behind after the fire. I know it wasn't an accident." He froze, eyes widening briefly before narrowing sharply, suspicion hardening his expression. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about," I pressed quietly, anger simmering just beneath my words. "The person trapped in the sealed apartment, the person who saw the fire being set. They're still there." "That's impossible," he said quickly, harshly, eyes darting nervously toward the sealed apartment door. "There's nobody." "I heard them," I interrupted sharply. "They spoke to me. They said you sealed them in because they saw what you did." He stepped back quickly, shaking his head sharply, voice suddenly tight, strained. "Caitlin, listen to me carefully. You need to leave this alone, right now." "Or what?" I challenged, voice shaking. "You'll seal me in too?" He didn't reply, just turned abruptly, walking quickly away without another word, leaving me standing in the hallway, breathless, terrified, and certain I'd finally uncovered something he'd spent years carefully hiding. I spent that day gathering whatever I could, old newspaper articles, internet searches, anything about the fire. The story was thin, accidental, electrical issues, no casualties. But buried in an old news forum was a brief mention of a missing person report filed quietly, then dismissed. No follow-up, no answers, just a question left hanging. Someone had been erased from the official record. As darkness approached again, dread coiled tightly in my stomach. I couldn't abandon whoever was trapped next door, couldn't ignore the voice desperately pleading for help. But I also knew now that uncovering this meant danger. Mr. Hartley's warning had made that clear enough. That night, just after midnight, I heard the scratching again, this time sharper, desperate, louder. My heart leapt painfully. I rushed toward the closet, flinging it open, expecting, hoping to see something, anything. But again, nothing. I sank to the floor, defeated, helpless, fighting tears. "I'm sorry," I whispered brokenly. "I don't know what else to do." For a long moment, silence. Then a soft whisper drifted through the vent again, hesitant, gentle. "You've already done enough." "What do you mean?" I replied softly, head spinning. "You heard me," the voice said quietly, almost gently. "You believed me. That's more than anyone else has ever done." "I can't leave you here," I whispered, throat tight with tears. "I can't walk away knowing you're trapped." "I don't think you have a choice anymore," came the soft, regretful reply. "They know now. They won't let you keep asking questions." "Who?" I asked again desperately. "Mr. Hartley? Is he the one who did this?" The whisper hesitated briefly, then quietly answered, "He helped, but there are others, and now they know you've found me." My blood ran cold. What should I do? "Leave," the voice urged softly, almost pleading. before it's too late, before you become like me. I shook my head, stubbornness and fear mixing painfully. I won't just abandon you. You're not abandoning me, came the gentle reply. You're keeping yourself safe. If you go, at least I'll know someone remembered me. My chest tightened painfully. What's your name? I whispered helplessly. Please try to remember. Tell me. There was a long pause, heavy with effort. Then finally, softly, hesitantly, the voice answered. Anna. My name was Anna. Anna, I whispered gently, fighting tears, heart aching painfully. I won't forget you. I know, she replied quietly, her voice fading gently. That's all I needed. Then silence settled again, deeper and heavier than ever, leaving me alone, heartbroken and terrified. Because Anna was right, whatever darkness had trapped her here now knew that I had found her. And it wouldn't wait long before it came for me too. After that night, sleep wasn't even a possibility. How could it be? Knowing what I knew now, every noise, every shadow, felt like it carried a threat. Anna's whispered warning stayed lodged in my mind, playing over and over. She'd begged me to leave, to stay safe, but I couldn't abandon her. Not like everyone else had, not like Mr. Hartley and whoever else was behind this had done years before. I paced the apartment as dawn came, feeling like a prisoner in my own home, waiting for something to happen, someone to arrive and stop me from talking. But no one came, no pounding at the door, no threats from the hallway, just silence, quiet, heavy, and oppressive. I knew I should leave immediately, pack what little I had and never look back. But the thought of leaving Anna behind, of letting her remain trapped and forgotten, filled me with a guilt I couldn't stomach. Her story deserved to be told. She deserved to be heard. So instead of running, I began writing it down, all of it, every detail, every conversation, every strange and unsettling moment. I documented Anna's whispers, the scratches on the wall, the sealed apartment, and Mr. Hartley's suspicious behavior. My plan was simple. If something happened to me, someone else needed to know the truth. Around midday, my phone buzzed. My stomach tightened sharply when I saw Mr. Hartley's name on the screen. I hesitated, heart hammering, before answering cautiously. Hello? His voice was calm, controlled. Caitlin, I wanted to check on you, see if you'd thought about what we discussed. My throat tightened painfully, but I forced my voice steady. I have. I'm not going anywhere. Not yet. A long pause. You're making a mistake. Why? I challenged softly, fear mixing sharply with anger. Because I know what you did. Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, colder. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice, I said, voice trembling with restrained fury. You chose to trap someone behind a wall and pretend they never existed. How can you justify that? You don't know what happened, he said sharply. You don't know why. Then tell me, I snapped, desperation breaking through. Tell me why Anna had to be hidden away. Tell me why you kept it a secret for 5 years. Help me understand. Silence stretched painfully, heavy with tension. When he finally replied, his voice was strained, nearly broken. Not over the phone. Meet me downstairs in the lobby. 1 hour. I'll tell you everything." Before I could answer, he hung up abruptly, leaving me holding the phone tightly, heart racing. I hesitated, torn between distrust and the need for answers. Ultimately, the chance to understand, even if it was dangerous, outweighed my fear. 1 hour later, I stood anxiously in the lobby, heart hammering as Mr. Hartley arrived, looking older, wearier than I'd ever seen him. He motioned me toward a small maintenance room behind the main staircase, shutting the door carefully behind us. "I don't have long," he began, voice low and urgent. "They're watching me now." "Who's watching you?" I demanded, desperate for clarity. "The owners," he replied bitterly, "the people who paid me to keep quiet after the fire." "So there was a fire?" I pressed, confusion swirling. "Or was it intentional?" He sighed heavily, shoulders sagging. "It was intentional. Anna saw them. She saw everything." "Saw what?" I whispered harshly, fear tightening my throat. His eyes flicked toward the door nervously, then back to me, resigned. They were trying to clear out the building. Insurance money, redevelopment plans. It doesn't matter. Anna saw them setting the fire. She recognized them. The fire spread faster than they planned, and by the time it was out, Anna was hiding in the back room, terrified. They found her afterward, scared and desperate, ready to tell everyone what she'd seen. My chest tightened painfully, anger and sorrow mingling. "And you let them lock her away?" "I didn't have a choice," he snapped, eyes wild, voice breaking. "They threatened me, my family. I thought they told me it would just be temporary, just long enough to sort things out. But it wasn't temporary. They sealed the apartment, erased her from records, threatened me again every time I considered speaking up. By then it was too late. Anna was supposed to disappear quietly." "But she didn't," I said quietly, my voice shaking. He shook his head slowly, grief-stricken. "No, somehow she stayed. I don't know how, I don't understand it. She's been there ever since, trapped in that place, and I couldn't do anything about it." "You could have tried," I whispered, anger burning sharply now. "You should have tried." He looked down, defeated. "I've spent 5 years hoping it would end on its own, but it hasn't. She's still there, and now you're involved. They know you know. It's dangerous for both of us." "Then let's end it," I said desperately. "Let's tell someone now, before it's too late." He shook his head sharply, fear returning to his expression. "They control everything. Caitlin police, inspectors, lawyers. No one will believe us. No one can help." I stepped closer, pleading desperately. "Then let her go. Open the apartment again. Help me release her, please." He stared at me, eyes haunted, then finally nodded slowly. "Tonight, after dark, wait for me upstairs." He slipped out quietly, leaving me shaking, frightened, and hopeful for the first time. When night finally fell, I waited anxiously in the hallway outside Anna's apartment. Mr. Hartley arrived a few minutes later, silent, withdrawn. He pulled out his keys, hands trembling, and unlocked the door. The heavy lock turned with a dull click, and he stepped back, letting me enter first. Inside, the apartment felt colder than before, emptier. Shadows stretched across charred walls, broken furniture looming in darkness. The air felt heavy, expectant, charged with desperation. "Anna?" I called softly, voice trembling. "We're here. You can come out now." Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. "Anna," I whispered again, fear building. "Please answer." But still nothing came, no whispers, no scratching, no sign she was there at all. Behind me, Mr. Hartley shifted nervously. "Maybe she's gone now," he said softly. "Maybe she just needed to be acknowledged." My heart twisted painfully. No, she was real. She spoke to me. I can't leave without. A soft sound interrupted me, gentle and cautious, from deep within the apartment. Footsteps slow, hesitant, moving toward us. Then, from the shadows, she stepped forward, pale and faint, but unmistakably real. Anna stood quietly, eyes wide and frightened, her figure flickering slightly at the edges, like a candle about to go out. "You came back," she whispered softly, disbelief in her voice. I reached out instinctively, hand trembling. "I told you I wouldn't leave you here." Her eyes softened, tears glistening faintly. "I can finally leave now, because of you." "How?" I asked, desperate and confused. "What do we do?" She smiled gently, sadly, stepping forward. "Just remember me. That's all I needed. To be seen, to be remembered." Her figure flickered again, softening at the edges, fading gently as she spoke again, quieter this time, almost a sigh. "Thank you." Then slowly, she vanished entirely, leaving only silence and a lingering, fragile warmth. I stood quietly, tears sliding down my face, understanding finally. Anna had only needed someone to know, to acknowledge her, to remember that she had existed, that her life mattered. Behind me, Mr. Hartley stood silently, head bowed, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry." I didn't reply, only stood quietly, feeling both loss and relief, knowing Anna was free. And finally, so was I. The days after Anna vanished felt like walking out of a nightmare. The apartment building itself was the same, at least on the surface, the same old hallway carpet, the faded walls, the cracked paint, but something deeper had shifted. It felt lighter, emptier in a good way, like a heavy curtain had finally been lifted. But even then, I knew things wouldn't simply go back to normal. You don't go through something like that and stay unchanged. Mr. Hartley disappeared the morning after we saw Anna, leaving nothing behind but a note slipped quietly under my door. It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it felt genuine. "I'm leaving the city. I won't ask forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but thank you for helping her. Take care of yourself." I read it 3 times, then folded it neatly and tucked it away. He hadn't been innocent in all this, but I understood his fear now. Sometimes, fear makes you into someone you never imagined you'd become. Maybe that was what happened to him, or maybe it had always been inside him waiting to come out. Either way, I wasn't sure forgiveness was mine to give. That felt like Anna's choice, not mine. As the weeks passed, I expected someone else to show up, the people who'd started the fire, the ones who'd hidden Anna away. But no one ever did. It was like they'd given up now, vanished just as thoroughly as Anna herself. The building stayed quiet, and no threats or warnings arrived. Whatever grip they'd held on this place had slipped, and maybe they'd realized it was finally over. But even though Anna was gone, I couldn't let her memory vanish quietly. Her story was too important, too real, to simply fade back into silence. She'd been erased once already. I wouldn't let it happen again. So I wrote everything down, every detail, every conversation, every late-night whisper through the vents. I gathered old documents, records from the city archives, and copies of those dismissed missing person reports. Then, when it felt complete, I sent copies to every local news outlet I could find: newspapers, websites, radio stations, anyone who might listen. I didn't care anymore if they thought I was crazy. I just needed Anna's story to be heard, to be acknowledged publicly, even if only once. The local paper picked it up first, running a quiet, skeptical piece buried on page 5. But within days, interest grew. People began sharing it online, talking about it in local forums. Questions were asked, names were mentioned, and slowly, the truth began slipping out, impossible to contain. I stayed quiet, anonymous, keeping to myself as much as possible, but even so, people found me: journalists, podcasters, curiosity seekers. They knocked on my door, left notes in my mailbox, called me repeatedly. I ignored them all, focusing instead on moving forward with my own life. I moved out of the apartment as soon as I could. It wasn't fear that drove me away, not anymore, but the realization that this place would never truly be home again. Too many memories, too many echoes. On my last night there, as I packed the final box, I paused, staring quietly at the wall vent, the same one where Anna's voice had first whispered through. It felt like years ago now, even though only a few weeks had passed. "Goodbye, Anna," I whispered softly, gently placing my hand against the wall, as if she might still somehow feel my presence. "I hope you're finally okay." The apartment didn't answer, of course, but I felt a small sense of peace settle over me, reassuring and gentle. Wherever she was now, I hoped she had found rest. She deserved that, at the very least. My new place was small, bright, and far away from the city. I chose somewhere quiet, surrounded by open space, trees, and fresh air. It wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful, and after everything I'd been through, that was enough. Slowly, life began returning to something that felt close to normal. I got a new job, one that kept me busy but didn't drain me. I spent more time outside, away from walls and enclosed spaces. I began sleeping again, soundly and without dreams, no scratching, no whispers, no hidden rooms. But some things didn't fade completely. I never completely stopped checking doors twice at night. I never fully trusted silence again, always expecting something just beyond hearing, waiting quietly in the dark. Then, one warm evening, months after I'd moved away, something arrived that brought it all sharply back. It was an envelope, plain white, with no return address. Inside, a single folded piece of paper with a short handwritten note. "They believed you. Everyone knows now. Thank you for not forgetting me." My chest tightened sharply as I read the words, heart racing with sudden disbelief and quiet wonder. The handwriting was careful, gentle, and familiar, the same fragile, uncertain script that had pleaded for freedom on the closet wall. Anna's handwriting. For a long moment, I stood frozen, staring at the paper, struggling to understand how it was possible. Then, slowly, a quiet warmth filled my chest, something like gratitude and relief, mingling gently with a deeper understanding. Anna hadn't vanished entirely. Maybe she never would. Her presence, her memory, it was out there now, known and shared by others. She wasn't trapped anymore, and she wasn't forgotten. That was enough. I kept the note carefully, placing it alongside Mr. Hartley's. Both notes lived quietly in my dresser drawer, tucked away, private but present. Gentle reminders of what had happened, of what I'd faced, of what Anna had endured, and how she'd finally found peace. My life moved forward, quietly, gently. Friends returned, laughter felt easier again, and slowly the tension of those long weeks eased from my shoulders. I knew I'd always carry that experience with me, but it wasn't a burden anymore. It was a memory, an important piece of who I had become. One afternoon, on the first anniversary of that night in the apartment, I returned to the city. The building stood quiet now, the lobby repainted, new tenants living their lives, unaware of the truth hidden in their walls. From the street, it looked utterly ordinary again, indistinguishable from any other old, worn apartment building. But I knew its secrets now, knew the shadows hidden inside it, and even if the world moved forward, forgetting and rebuilding, Anna and I would always remember. As I stood there, quietly watching from across the street, a breeze stirred gently, warm and reassuring, brushing softly across my face. I closed my eyes briefly, feeling it surround me, peaceful and familiar. Maybe it was nothing just wind on a summer afternoon, or maybe, just maybe, it was her way of telling me she was still there, still remembered, still real in every way that mattered. Either way, as I walked quietly away, I finally felt at peace. Anna was free, and because of her, so was I.